Welcome to Creepy Vibes. Today, we're not talking about haunted houses or lonely roads. We're diving straight into the backseat of real horror. This is 20 true disturbing rideshare experiences in Texas, where everyday rides turn into nightmares. From passengers who vanished mid-trip to drivers who were never supposed to exist, these stories will make you think twice before tapping request ride. But before we hit the road, here's one chilling fact. Most viewers make a huge mistake. They listen, get scared, and leave without subscribing. And when they do, they miss out on the darkest, most unsettling true stories we only share with the ones who stay. Don't be one of them. Smash that subscribe button right now, because today's ride doesn't end when you reach your destination. It ends when you realize you were never in control. Where are you watching from? And what time is it over there? Drop it in the comments, because here at Creepy Vibes, the ride has already begun. It started the way these things always do. A night that felt normal. A ride that should have lasted 15 minutes. A decision made because it was too hot, too late, and too much trouble to wait for her brother. Lauren had finished her shift at the diner off Montana Avenue in El Paso. The AC had gone out mid-evening, so by the time she punched out, her uniform clung to her like wet paper and her hair felt plastered to the back of her neck. Her feet ached, her phone was at 12%, and the idea of walking the 6 blocks to her apartment in that sticky, quiet kind of dark made her stomach twist. She didn't like walking alone at night in El Paso, not after what had happened to her coworker, Gina, last fall. No one ever found her purse, just her shoes by the canal. So she called a rideshare. Not the usual app she used. Her Uber account had been flagged for a billing issue. She used some off-brand one called Drift. A friend at the diner had told her it was cheap and local, that it pulled in drivers who couldn't get approved on the main apps but still wanted the work. Lauren didn't think much of that at the time. Just tapped it open, dropped her PIN, and confirmed the ride. Driver, Manuel C. Vehicle, silver Nissan Altima. Arrival in 3 minutes. He pulled up in 2. She barely glanced at him before sliding into the back seat. He looked clean, normal. Maybe mid-40s. Wore a baseball cap low over his eyes and had one of those blue pine tree air fresheners dangling from the rear view, swinging back and forth like a tiny pendulum. The interior smelled like cloves and something faintly metallic, but again, nothing unusual. She gave a tired hey and buckled up. He didn't say a word. Just nodded, smiled into the mirror, and pulled away from the curb. For the first few blocks, everything was fine. The streets were mostly empty, the late-night traffic lights blinking yellow. They passed an Alsup's, the car wash with the busted sign, and that weird open lot with the statue of the Virgin Mary facing the highway. Lauren checked her phone, 9% now. She plugged it into the cheap power bank she kept in her purse, but it didn't take the charge. The screen dimmed a little. A text popped up from her brother. "You sure you don't want me to swing by?" She didn't reply. Then she noticed something odd. They were heading west. Her apartment was east. She said, leaning forward a little, trying to keep her voice light. "I think you're going the wrong way?" The driver didn't respond. Didn't even look in the mirror. Lauren waited a beat, then tapped the lock on her door. The little button didn't move. She tried it again. Nothing. "Hey," she said, louder this time, "you missed the turn. I live off Cotton. You need to loop back." Still, he didn't speak. Just kept driving. The smile in the mirror had vanished. Now his face was stone. Lauren's heart began to thump. Not panic yet, but that creeping unease, like watching a stranger hold your child or seeing someone try your front door when they think no one's home. She opened the app to check the ride path, but the GPS was frozen. Her location showed as a dot spinning in place, no street names visible. It was like the app had crashed or like she was no longer on any registered road. I said. She reached for the driver's seat, voice rising. Stop the damn car. That's when he finally spoke. You said cotton? His voice was soft, not accented, but flat, like someone trying to speak through a smile they didn't feel. That's where she used to live. Lauren's breath caught. Who? He didn't answer. They passed under a flickering streetlight, and she caught a glimpse of the road sign, Lala's Road. She didn't know it, never seen it. The area around them had changed to fewer houses now, more brush and chain-link fences, and patches of desert pushing up through broken concrete. This wasn't El Paso anymore. Not really. She tried her door handle. It didn't budge. The lock still dead. She slammed her palm against the window, hoping anyone was outside. But there was no one. Just that awful Texas night heat. The silent shape of abandoned gas stations, and a long strip of two-lane blacktop disappearing behind them. I need to get out, she said. Her voice shook now. Let me out. Now. The driver tilted his head like he was listening to something only he could hear. She begged too, he said after a pause. She cried. Scratched the glass so hard her nails broke. Lauren looked. At the back of his head, pale skin beneath the thinning hair. She gripped her phone, but it was down to 1%. No signal, no bars, no hope. I don't know what you think this is, she said, her throat dry. But if you don't stop the car, I'll scream. You already are, he murmured. You just don't hear it yet. The road curved sharply. No lights, no signs, no cell towers. Just the sound of tires against gravel and the low, humming rattle of something loose in the trunk. Lauren clutched the seat. Her mouth tasted like copper. He began to hum. Something tuneless, off-key, but steady. It filled the car, thick and unnatural, like a lullaby soaked in mud. Her fingers found the seatbelt buckle and pressed it once, twice. Nothing. It was jammed. Then she remembered the emergency door lock. Some cars had them near the bottom, beside the seat. She leaned down fast, searching, groping there. A red tab. She yanked it up. Click. The lock popped. She threw the door open. The air slammed into her like a wall. She hit the ground, hard knees scraping pavement, palms burning. The car screeched as the driver slammed the brakes. Gravel spit from the tires. Lauren ran, didn't look back. Just sprinted toward the faint shape of a cell tower blinking red in the far distance. Behind her, the Altima idled. Then it reversed. He was coming back. She cut into the brush. Desert thorns ripped her jeans. Something bit her ankle. She didn't care. She ran until her chest felt like it would split open, until her legs refused to go another step. Then dash headlights. Not his. A truck. White, dusty. Older guy at the wheel. Eyes wide when he saw her, waving frantically from the roadside like a lunatic. He let her in. She collapsed against the seat, babbling. He tried to. He wouldn't stop. He wouldn't. The man didn't ask questions. Just drove. Took her straight to the sheriff's office outside Fabin's. They traced the app. Drift didn't exist anymore. No driver registered under that name. No record of the ride. Just a broken phone in her purse, a bruised knee, and the faint smell of cloves that never quite left her clothes. She never took a rideshare again. Wouldn't even look at one. And every once in a while, just once in a great while, she swears she sees that silver Altima parked down her street. Engine idling, pine tree swaying in the mirror, waiting. The night started like any other, a hot, sticky July evening with a kind of humid air that wraps around your face and neck like wet wool. Justin didn't mind. He liked the heat. Said it reminded him of summers in Corpus when his cousins would. let him ride on the back of their four-wheelers through muddy trails while the cicadas screamed like rusty hinges in the trees. But tonight, he wasn't in Corpus. He was in New Braunfels, just outside of town, finishing up a shift at the closing end of a roadside diner that still played Buddy Holly on the jukebox and served sweet tea in mason jars. His phone buzzed in his apron pocket right as he was wiping down the last of the booths. A girl named Claire from San Marcos had texted, "You up? Can I see you tonight?" There were 2 hearts at the end. That was enough to make him grin. He pulled off the apron, clocked out, and walked out into the heavy Texas dark. The gravel crunched under his boots as he thumbed open the Rideshare app. His old truck had been in the shop for 3 days now, something with the timing belt, or maybe the radiator. He didn't remember exactly, just that it was going to cost more than he had, and the shop guy said, "Don't push her or she'll strand you." So he hadn't. That's why he booked the ride instead. From New Braunfels to San Marcos, 28 miles, $40. The app confirmed it in green letters. "Your driver is on the way. Eta, 10 minutes. The profile picture was some older guy with thinning gray hair, name listed as Doan. 5 stars, over 700 rides. Nothing unusual. Justin sat down on the curb under the yellow spill of the diner's parking lot light and smoked while he waited. The crickets were loud. A freight train whined somewhere out west. Every few seconds, he glanced at the map, watching the little car icon crawl toward him from the south. Even though he'd never seen any rideshare drivers come from that direction before, not unless they were lost. The little car was cutting through land that didn't really have roads, not paved ones anyway. But apps glitch all the time. He didn't think much of it. 10 minutes passed, then 15. At 20, he started to frown. The car icon hadn't stopped moving, but it wasn't getting any closer either. It was circling around some wooded area near Lake Dunlap, then cutting across fields as if it were driving through fences and creeks. He almost canceled. He was reaching for the red button when a set of headlights turned slowly onto the gravel at the edge of the lot. A dark blue Chevy Impala, older model, maybe a 2005 or 2006. It moved slower than normal, like it didn't want to be there. The windows were tinted too dark to see inside, but the license plate matched the app. He stood, flicked his cigarette into the ditch, and stepped up to the passenger door. It opened before he touched the handle. "San Marcos?" a man asked. The voice was low, crackly like a bad AM signal. Justin nodded. "Yeah." He slipped inside and shut the door. It was freezing. Not cool like good, a cold like a meat locker. The dashboard lights were dim and green. The driver didn't look at him, just shifted into drive and pulled out of the lot. They didn't talk for a while. Justin stared out the window at the black trees sliding past, their tops waving gently in the night breeze. The road was unfamiliar narrow, lined with thick brush on both sides, no center line, no shoulder. It wasn't I-35, that was for sure. It didn't even look like a service road. The longer they drove, the less Justin recognized. He pulled up the app again, but it wouldn't load. Just a spinning wheel. No service. No GPS. He tried texting Claire, but it didn't go through. "Hey," he said, shifting forward. "What road is this? Isn't 35 faster?" The driver didn't answer. His hands were white on the wheel. Too white, like paper or chalk. The hair on the back of Justin's neck prickled. "Sir?" Still no answer. Justin leaned slightly to the side, just enough to catch the driver's face in the dim glow from the dash. It wasn't the same man in the profile photo. Not even close. This guy had deep sunken cheeks, eyes that looked filmed over like milky glass, and skin that sagged off the jawline like it was too loose. The air inside the car started to smell wet, earthy, like turned soil. Justin's stomach rolled. "Hey, stop the car," he said, louder this time. "I think I need to get out." The car didn't stop. In fact, it sped up. Outside, the woods were thicker now. No houses, no fences. The trees leaned close to the road like they wanted to reach inside. Justin grabbed the handle and yanked. Locked. He pounded on the window. Nothing. The driver kept staring ahead. Unmoving, eyes wide and glassy. Justin's breathing got faster. He looked down at the floor, hoping to find anything that might help him break a window. That's when he saw the water. Just a few drops at first, but they were seeping in from beneath the front seats. He blinked.
Reached down and touched it. Cold. Icy cold.
He looked out the windshield. The trees were gone now. The road was gone. They were underwater. The headlights cut through murky green nothingness. Fish, small ones, flitted past in brief flashes. The car floated, tilted slightly to the left. Bubbles streamed past the windows. "What the hell?" Justin whispered, heart hammering. He turned to the driver again and screamed. The man was bloated now, blue. His jaw hung slack, and water was dripping from his eye sockets. Justin slammed his fists into the door. He screamed and kicked. The car spun slowly, nose dipping downward. He could feel the weight of the lake pulling them. The pressure. His ears popped. His breath started to fog the glass. Then he woke up flat on the gravel outside the diner, face scraped. Hands bleeding. It was still dark. The diner's porch light buzzed overhead. No car, no Impala. Just his phone lying beside him with a crack in the screen. He sat up slowly, everything aching. He opened the Rideshare app. No ride history. No confirmation. No profile for Don. He stumbled back inside the diner and called the cops. They thought he was high or maybe heat-stroked. But the next day, after a long nap and 2 bottles of Gatorade, he went digging. Talked to a guy he knew who used to work the docks at Lake Dunlap. That guy pulled up an article from 2 weeks ago. A Chevy Impala, blue, pulled from the lake near the dam. Driver was an older man named Don Herrera, retired military. Had a heart attack on the road and drove straight into the water. They found his body still buckled in. The car had been submerged for 4 days before anyone saw the oil slick on the surface. Justin didn't sleep for 3 nights. And when he did, he dreamed of fish swimming through the dashboard, of a cold hand reaching for him from the passenger seat. And every now and then, when he drives near a lake or a river at night, his phone buzzes once with a notification that vanishes before he can read it. But he knows what it says, and he never opens the app again. Not at midnight, not alone, not in Texas. It was just past 11 p.m. when Alina opened the Rideshare app outside the dive bar in Waco. She'd stayed longer than planned, partly because her best friend wouldn't stop talking about her breakup and partly because she didn't feel like going back to her cramped studio apartment just yet. The app said her driver would arrive in 2 minutes, a silver Hyundai Elantra named Brian. She glanced around the nearly empty parking lot, lit only by a flickering halogen light and the blue wash of neon from the bars, open. Sign. The humidity clung to her skin like a film, and the mosquitoes were out in force. She hugged her arms, swatted one from her neck, and stared down at her phone. Brian was here. She saw the car pull up slowly, headlights washing over the cracked lot. The make and model matched. The license plate matched. There was someone in the front seat, but it was too dark to see clearly, just a vague silhouette beyond the windshield glare. The doors unlocked with a chirp. She climbed into the back, muttering, "Hey, thanks for coming." The driver, a young guy, mid-30s maybe, with a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, gave a friendly, "No problem," without looking back. The interior smelled faintly of cherry air freshener and something else, something earthy and damp that she couldn't place. Her skin prickled slightly, but she brushed it off. Maybe the last passenger had been at the lake or something. Then, the man in the passenger seat slowly turned around. He was sitting too still. Not the idle fidgeting you'd expect from someone in the front seat. His movements were deliberate, slow like syrup, and his neck creaked as if the bones had forgotten how to turn. His face emerged into the halo of the overhead light as he twisted. Fully toward her, he was pale. Not just pale like someone who doesn't go outside, pale like milk left too long on the counter. And his eyes were wide, almost too wide, and fixed on her. He whispered, "Alina." Her name, not hey or hello or even hi, miss. Her name, quiet, strained, like he had pulled it up from deep inside a well. She froze. The seat beneath her suddenly felt cold. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her eyes darted to the driver. "Did you just say something?" she asked, forcing a lightness into her voice that didn't match the pounding of her heart. The driver didn't answer right away. He glanced into the rearview mirror and gave her a puzzled look. "Huh, the guy in the front," she said, her voice louder now. He just said my name." The driver glanced at the passenger seat, then back at her. "What guy?" Her throat closed. She leaned forward, peering around the seat. The passenger side was empty. Her brain struggled to reconcile what she was seeing with what she knew had just happened. There had been a man who turned around and whispered her name, but the seat was bare. No bag, no indentation on the cushion, nothing. The driver's voice cut through the rising noise in her head. "Are you okay? I thought I saw someone in the front. Sorry. Maybe I'm just tired." "Long night?" he asked casually. Like, this was normal. She nodded automatically, though her eyes stayed glued to the passenger seat. The overhead light flickered once and went out. Now it was just the dull glow from the dashboard and the world sliding past outside the windows. The shadows deep and thick like ink pooling in corners. They pulled onto the interstate, heading south. Her apartment was 15 minutes away. 15 minutes and she'd be safe. She could close the door, lock it twice, throw on some music, and try to laugh this off. Her mind must have played a trick on her. That had to be it, but the silence in the car was too heavy now. Not the normal kind. Not the quiet of strangers coexisting. This was the kind of silence that noticed you. She looked up at the rearview mirror. The driver was watching the road, expression unreadable. Her phone buzzed in her hand, a notification. She tapped it. "You're currently riding with Brian. Please confirm your driver." The picture loaded slowly, bad signal. Then it did. Woman.mid-40s.blonde. Named Brian. Only by the app's input. This was not the driver she was in the car with. She shot up straight, panic curling in her gut like a fist. "Hey," she said, "you're not Brian." The driver didn't answer. She glanced at the door handle. The child lock icon glowed faintly red. "Let me out," she said, louder now. "Pull over." Still, no answer. Then the voice came again. Not from the driver, from the front passenger seat. From the empty seat. It whispered, "Don't." Alina let out a choked sound and slammed her hand against the window. "Let me out. This isn't funny." The car kept moving, faster now. The exits flew past, ignored. The trees on either side of the road blurred. Her breath caught in her throat. She looked down at her phone. No signal. No bars. She opened the emergency dial. Nothing happened. She pounded her fists on the seat in front of her. "Stop the car!" The driver's head tilted slightly, just enough to glance back at her through the mirror, and for the first time she saw his eyes, dark, sunken, and flat. No reflection. Then he said your name. He only says the names of the ones we're keeping. A cold wind rushed through the car, even though the windows were all closed. The temperature dropped so quickly her breath fogged. She looked to her right. The man was there again. This time his face was closer, too close, inches from hers. His lips didn't move, but the words came anyway, crawling inside her head like cold worms. "Almost home, Alina." She screamed and scrambled for the other side of the car, pressing herself against the far door. She clawed at the lock, the window, anything she could reach. The lights outside were fewer now. No traffic. Just endless trees and blacktop and something wrong humming through the tires. Then, suddenly the car stopped, dead in the middle of the road. No warning, no brake lights. The driver got out. His door slammed shut. She scrambled to the front seat, threw herself over the console, and clawed at the wheel. The keys were gone. The dashboard was dark. The passenger door clicked open. She didn't look. She couldn't, but she felt it. The cold breath, the voice whispering, "You're mine now." When they found her car the next morning, parked neatly at the edge of a tree line near the Brazos River, the doors were locked from the inside. Her phone was on the seat, still open to the Ride app. Her account history showed the trip had never started. There was no record of a pickup, no driver named Brian in the area. Nothing at all except one strange detail. In the ride notes section, where passengers could leave instructions, someone had typed in all capital letters, "He's always in the passenger seat." It was supposed to be a quick trip, nothing unusual. 4 friends, Liam, Marcus, Janie, and Allison had spent the weekend in Austin celebrating Marcus's new job. Drinking too much, staying up too late, dancing at clubs they were probably too old for now. On Sunday evening, instead of driving back hungover and half-blind with fatigue, they pooled their money and booked a rideshare to Dallas. Not Uber or Lyft, they used a newer app called Drift, cheaper and supposedly vetted, but the reviews were mixed. Liam had found the driver, a woman named Melody. Profile picture with a wide, toothy smile that somehow didn't reach her eyes. She had a white Toyota Highlander, 5 stars, and a badge that said Drift Pro, 287 rides. Allison made a joke about the number being unlucky. No one laughed. They were picked up at 9:18 p.m. sharp, just off East Riverside. Melody didn't speak much. She was in her late 30s, maybe early 40s, pale skin, long black hair that hung too straight to be natural, and huge eyes that seemed too big for her face. She wore thick eyeliner that made her lashes look almost spider-like. She didn't smile when they climbed in. Liam sat up front. The other 3 crammed into the back with Allison stuck behind the driver. The ride started normally. They chatted, laughed, passed around a bottle of warm Coke mixed with Jack. About 30 minutes in, Liam turned down the music. Melody was playing something low and whispery, like old gospel, slowed to half speed, and tried to spark conversation. "So you from around here?" Melody didn't answer for several seconds. Then she glanced over at him and said, in a voice too calm, "No, not anymore." Liam blinked. Not anymore? But she didn't say anything else. She just kept her eyes on the dark highway, the green glow of road signs slipping by like ghosts on the windshield. The friends gave each other looks, the kind you share when something's off, but you don't want to say it out loud. About an hour in, they pulled off into a rest area just outside Waco. Allison had to pee, and Janie said she might as well stretch. Melody parked beside the vending machines. The place was mostly empty except for a long hauler asleep in his cab, and the flickering yellow lights made everything feel like an abandoned movie set. Liam stayed in the car, scrolling through his phone. Marcus smoked a cigarette just beyond the edge of the parking lot. Allison and Janie walked to the bathroom. That was the last time they saw Allison. Janie came back first, said she thought Allison had gone ahead to the car. When she didn't see her in the back seat, she figured maybe she was still inside. Liam and Marcus exchanged a few confused words, then all three of them walked back to the restroom. They searched the stalls, called out her name. No answer. They circled the rest area. Still nothing. They asked Melody, who was leaning against the driver's side door, arms folded. Did Allison come back already? Melody blinked. Who? Our friend. The one who was sitting behind you? Melody shook her head slowly. There were only 3 of you. They laughed at first, thought she was kidding. Then they looked closer. Melody wasn't smiling. Not even a twitch at the corner of her mouth. Her eyes didn't blink. Just stared. There were 4 of us, Liam said, voice rising now. 4. I booked the ride. You picked up 4. Melody tilted her head like she was trying to hear something faint. I don't remember that. Only 3 were in the car. Marcus. Check the app. The original booking showed 4 riders. He showed it to her. She looked at it like it meant nothing. I only saw 3, she said. They tried calling Allison's phone, straight to voicemail. They asked the trucker if he'd seen anyone. He just grunted, said he'd been asleep. They searched the rest. Area again, called out into the surrounding woods. No response, no footsteps. Just the sound of crickets and something bigger shuffling deep behind the trees. Janie started crying. Marcus was furious. He wanted to call the cops, but Liam stopped him. They were drunk. It was late. They didn't have anything concrete to say. Just a weird story and a missing friend who might have wandered off. Let's just drive back. Marcus snapped. We'll file a report in Dallas, so they did. The rest of the ride was silent. Melody didn't play music. She didn't speak. She didn't even turn on the overhead lights when they stopped to drop each one off. Janie first. Then Marcus. Liam was last stop when she pulled up to his place in Oak Cliff. He hesitated before getting out. You seriously don't remember her? Melody turned her head slowly. Sometimes people remember things that didn't happen. You'd be surprised. How often that is. Liam didn't sleep that night. The next day, he called the police. Filed a missing person report. He gave them everything. The app, the driver's name, the timeline. They said they'd look into it. 2 days later, an officer called him back. There was no Melody listed on the Drift app. No driver with that name. No White Highlander logged. Under his booking. The booking showed completed, but the driver field was blank. Liam went to Drift HQ in Dallas himself. Talked to a guy at the help desk. Showed him the screenshots. The guy looked confused. Said their system didn't show any driver ever accepting the ride. It shouldn't have happened. But it did, Liam said. I was in the car. The guy frowned. Well, the system shows it was canceled just before 9 p.m. on Sunday. You never got picked up. Liam opened his mouth to argue, but something clicked then. A sound in his memory, something quiet, something small. A whisper. He didn't remember seeing Allison get back in the car. He remembered Janie and her walking toward the bathroom, laughing. He remembered waiting, but not seeing Allison come out. He remembered the inside of the Highlander from then on as having only 3 voices. He hadn't noticed it then. Maybe didn't want to. But something about that moment, about Melody's voice, had made him forget. Or misremember, he called. Marcus and Janie. Both of them remembered her getting back in. But when pressed, their stories didn't line up. Marcus said she got in after him. Janie said she got in first. Neither remembered seeing her face clearly after they left the rest stop. A week later, a search team went through the woods near the rest stop. They found nothing. No clothes, no phone. Nobody. 2 weeks after that, Liam got a text from a number he didn't recognize. No name. Just coordinates. He hesitated. Then he drove out there. It was an abandoned trailer park about 40 minutes outside Hillsboro. Weeds had overtaken most of the gravel lots. The trailers were rotting from the inside out. He found the unit the coordinates pointed to. Inside was dark, airless. Dust in the air so thick it coated his lungs. The wallpaper peeled in long strips like dead skin. In the back room, taped to the wall, were photos. Hundreds of them. All black and white. All of people getting into cars. Rest stops. Highway shoulders. Parking garages, rideshares. All of them marked with red X's across their faces except for one. Allison. No X, just her. Looking over her shoulder, mid-step, as if she'd heard something behind her. Then there was a sound behind Liam. A slow drag of something heavy across the linoleum. He turned, but there was nothing there. She'd always hated driving at night in Houston, especially in August when the heat stuck to the windshield like breath and the air outside felt too thick to breathe. But her shift at the hospital ended at 10:30, and by the time she made it out of the parking garage and onto I-69, the sky was black and the streetlights cast their sick yellow glow over cracked pavement and tired billboards. Madison kept the windows up, her AC humming low, NPR mumbling about foreign politics, and her hands clenched tighter than they should have been on the steering wheel. She didn't notice the rideshare request at first. Her Uber driver app pings. When she hit the loop, the name only half loading, Zach. That gave her pause. Her brother's name had been Zach. He died 6 years ago, August 2nd. The same damn day, and she still wasn't good at dealing with coincidences like that. She shook her head, thumbed, accept, and glanced at the pin drop, Midtown. Not far. As she pulled onto the narrow curb near an old Shell station, the man waiting looked ordinary in that almost too blurry kind of way, like your eyes couldn't. Quite subtle on the edges, tall, wearing a dark shirt, faded jeans, no bag, no phone in his hand. Just standing there, arms at his sides. Madison rolled down the passenger window halfway. "You Zach?" she asked. He leaned down, his face catching the streetlight, and her stomach clenched before she could figure out why. He looked nothing like her brother, not really, but the eyes were dark and unreadable in the same way. "Yes," he said, and opened the door. He slid into the back seat, calm and quiet, and immediately she got that crawling feeling she sometimes got when she discharged patients she knew were going to die soon. The ones who smiled too politely. The ones who never blinked enough. She flicked her eyes to the rearview mirror. "Where are we heading tonight?" The man gave her the address near the old Bayou line, past where the roads turned to dirt and neighborhoods were less planned development and more forgotten. She felt the edge of unease, but nodded. She'd driven weirder. They were silent for the first 10 minutes except for the GPS chirping turns. Then, just as they passed under the overpass where the lights always flickered out, the man spoke. "You? Remember that time Zach tied your shoelaces together at Aunt Maggie's funeral?" She stiffened. Her hands went cold on the wheel. She glanced in the mirror. The man wasn't smiling, just watching her. "Hi," her voice cracked. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You fell face first into the dirt," he said, tone almost amused. "You didn't cry until later. Not because of the fall, though. Because Dad yelled, remember?" Her heart thundered in her chest. She hadn't told anyone about that, not even their mom. Zach had teased her about it for years afterward, calling her gravel face when they were alone. He'd stopped after he turned 17, after he got quiet, after "Who are you?" she asked, her voice too sharp. The man leaned forward slightly, his voice quieter now. "You smell like those little cherry lollipops you used to hide under your bed. I used to steal them when you weren't home." Her mouth went dry. Her hands gripped the wheel so hard her knuckles blanched. The road ahead twisted toward a poorly lit stretch, and every instinct screamed to stop the car and tell him to get out. But something stronger, maybe the need to know, maybe something darker kept her foot on the gas. "I don't know how you know those things," she said. He didn't answer. She glanced again. His face seemed softer in the dark now. Not quite. Zach, but the voice had changed. Lower, slower, like Zach's had been in his last year before the accident. Before he'd driven out past the refinery and wrapped their dad's old Dodge around a rusted cattle gate. Madison cleared her throat. "How did you know him?" The man tilted his head. "What if I told you I was him?" She laughed once. Sharp, panicked bark. "Then I'd say you were sick, or playing some cruel joke." He didn't laugh. "You said you were Zach," she added. "When I picked you up," he shrugged in the mirror. "I said yes. Doesn't mean I lied." Her ears buzzed. She reached over to lower the volume on the radio, but the dial wouldn't move. It wasn't stuck, it just didn't respond. Screen dimmed. The AC whined and slowed. Her headlights flickered once. "What's going on?" The man leaned forward, whispering now, like he was telling a secret. "Do you remember the lake house? The summer before I died?" She did. They'd gone there every summer until Zach turned 18. Their parents had fought that whole week. Zach had disappeared for 2 days and come back with sunburn and a haunted look. He never told her where he'd gone. But one night, sitting on the dock, he'd said something strange. "If I ever die, don't try to talk to me. Promise?" She hadn't understood then. She had said nothing. Now the stranger in her car, this thing was echoing Zach's voice. Using memories only he would know. "I made you promise," he said, voice low and gravelly. The lights along the road were gone now. They were driving through a corridor of trees. Too many trees. She didn't remember this stretch being so thick, so wild. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered. "But you thought about it," he replied. "On the anniversary, every year. You said my name under your breath. You wanted to hear me again." She shook her head. "No, yes," he said, "even when you sleep. Especially then." Madison hit the brakes, hard. The car skidded and came to a halt. She turned in her seat. The back was empty. Her chest rose and felt like she'd run a mile. She looked around, nothing. The door was shut. No sign he'd ever been there. She checked. Her app, no ride history. No charge, no name. The phone buzzed in her lap, a text, unknown number. Just 2 words, gravel face. She threw the phone onto the floor and slammed the car into drive. She drove home shaking. She didn't sleep that night or the next dot, and when the voice came again, this time from the static of her old bedroom radio, she didn't turn it off. Because, deep down, a part of her still wanted to hear him, even if what came back wasn't really Zach. It started the way most late-night drives do, in Corpus Christi humid air pressing up against the windows, the buzz of insects outside barely muffled by the hum of the AC, and the low sound of classic rock or Tejano radio drifting through the tune through the fado through the madam is a car like a ghost that didn't know it was supposed to be gone. Miguel Salinas had been driving rideshare for almost 2 years now, mostly night shifts because that's when things got interesting. Less traffic, fewer soccer moms, more drunks, more stories, sometimes weird ones, the kind you tell only once. In a bar after 3 beers, like the guy who tried to tip him with a live parrot, or the woman who claimed her ex-boyfriend had followed her to the afterlife and back. You heard enough of them, and it started to blur the line between real and bullshit. Miguel usually stayed on the side of skepticism, but that changed after the night he picked up the man near the marina. The app dinged around 1:22 a.m. It was a slow night, only 2 short runs before that, both from bars near downtown. This one was from a location not often pinged, a small gravel pull-off near the northern stretch of the bay, just off the side of Highway 181. No business out there, no apartments, just a weather-worn bait shack that had been closed for over a year, and the water beyond it, black and calm and smelling of salt and rot. He thought maybe it was a glitch, but the dot was pulsing, and the writer's name said Noah H. No photo, but the rating was high, 4.98 stars. Miguel figured it was just some guy who'd gone fishing and needed a ride back inland. Not unheard of, he pulled up with the passenger window down and his hazard lights on. The old bait shop sat, hunched in the darkness like a forgotten relic, its windows boarded up and its sign so faded it was just wood now. Then a man stepped out from behind it. No flashlight, no gear. Just a dark silhouette in a heavy coat, walking calmly, almost too calmly, across the gravel. Miguel blinked twice. It was over 85 degrees even at night and humid enough to make you feel like you were breathing through a wet rag. No one wore coats. The man opened the rear door and slid in without a word. Miguel glanced in the rear view. Thin face, pale, wet-looking hair slicked down like he'd been caught in a storm. His skin had that clammy sheen people get when they're sick or just crawled out of something cold. You Noah? Miguel asked. The man nodded once. His eyes caught the dash lights and reflected strangely, like the eyes of a deer or a cat. Miguel shrugged it off and tapped the screen. The route said to take him up toward Leopard Street, not far from the refineries. A 20-minute drive, give or take. Miguel turned back toward the highway, and the road disappeared beneath them. The first few minutes were silent. Miguel kept checking the rear view more than usual. The man wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't doing anything, just sitting there, facing forward, hands folded in his lap. When they passed under streetlights, Miguel saw the coat was old and worn, the kind of long gray thing people stopped wearing in the 90s, and the man's pants looked soaked. At one point, he smelled something sharp and briny, like the tide had come in and left behind something it wasn't supposed to. The car didn't have any seafood in it, but the smell got stronger as they drove, like wet rope and algae and something. Just a little off, a little decayed. You fishing or something? Miguel asked, trying to break the weird silence. No, the man said. Just that. Nothing else. No chuckle. No explanation. Voice flat. The kind of voice you don't expect to hear after midnight, more like a thought than a sound. They crossed the harbor bridge and the wind kicked up briefly. Miguel felt a chill in his arms and turned down the AC. The passenger hadn't moved. Hadn't shifted even once. Miguel glanced in the mirror again and noticed something strange. The man's reflection wasn't quite aligned. It lagged half a second behind his movements. Subtle but noticeable if you were looking close. Miguel blinked and shook his head. Too many night shifts, not enough sleep. That was all. Then came the turn onto Up River Road. It was darker here. Fewer streetlights, just patches of yellow light every few hundred feet. The smell was stronger now. Miguel caught himself breathing through his mouth. His phone screen lit. Up again. The ride still showed active. The GPS arrow moved normally. He looked in the mirror again. The seat was empty. Miguel slammed the brakes. Hard. The car skidded a little, tires screeching against the pavement. He turned around, heart hammering, breath caught somewhere between a shout and a gasp. Empty. The door hadn't opened. The locks were still on. There had been no click, no creak, no weight shifting, but the man was gone. Not even a wet mark on the seat. Just absence, like he'd been erased. He threw on the dome light. Nothing. The seatbelt was still buckled. He checked. The ride history. The app still said, in progress. No endpoint, no cancellation. He backed up the footage from the dashcam and watched in real time as the man disappeared. One frame he was there. The next gone. Like a blink dot, Miguel drove to a gas station, hands shaking, and sat under the lights. He smelled his own sweat and fear layered over the brine still lingering in the air. He replayed the footage over and over. Same result. Nothing opened. Nothing moved. The timestamp never skipped. He uploaded it to his laptop later and slowed it to a crawl. Frame by frame, second by second. Still the same. Gone. He submitted a ticket to the rideshare company. They flagged the ride, refunded it, and sent him a boilerplate response. When he followed up, they claimed the rider had never been confirmed. Noah H. didn't exist in their database. No profile. No trip history. No trace. Even his own app history showed the ride as canceled 2 minutes before the pickup time. The footage? Gone from cloud storage within 3 days. Deleted, they said. An error. Miguel stopped driving nights. He started seeing things in shadows, in mirrors, catching movement where there shouldn't be any. The briny smell came back sometimes, in his house, in his car, clinging to him after showers. Like something followed him home. A month later, a woman reached out to him on Facebook. Said she'd seen a screenshot of the ride log on a Reddit post. She said her brother Noah disappeared in 1997 after a fishing trip near the same bait shack. His body was never found. The only thing left behind was his coat, folded neatly on the rocks, and his phone sealed in a Ziploc bag. His last text had read, "I think I see someone." She asked if Miguel had seen him. Miguel didn't reply. He blocked her. Not because he didn't believe her, he did. But because when she'd messaged him, the briny smell had filled his apartment again, stronger than ever. And the water in the toilet? It rippled, even though no one had touched it. As if something unseen had moved through the room. Or was still there, waiting. He doesn't drive anymore. Barely leaves the house. But every now and then, just after midnight, his phone dings. A rideshare request. Always the same spot by this way. Always the same name, and the air starts to smell like salt. It was late spring in Waco, the kind of warm Texas night where the air feels thick and old, like it's been around too long and seen too much. The streets were mostly empty, except for a few cars crawling down Franklin Avenue and some stragglers. Outside the bars near Austin Avenue, Jesse Holt was finishing up his shift as a rideshare driver, just a few more trips before he called it a night. He wasn't in it for the money really, he worked at a body shop during the day, but something about driving at night helped quiet his thoughts. Kept him from remembering things he didn't want to remember. His wife had been gone 2 years. Now cancer, quick, brutal. He didn't like the silence of the house, didn't like the way the shadows stretched too long down the hallway. At 12:47, the ping came in. Pickup near the Brazos Riverwalk, drop off over by Lake Air Drive. The name on the screen was just C. Miller. Jesse swiped to accept and turned down University Parks Drive. The air from the cracked window brushed against his arm like warm breath, and the breeze carried the faint smell of water and honeysuckle. He pulled up near the curb where a figure stood, a tall man in a dark coat, which seemed odd in the heat. No bag, no phone in hand, just standing there with both arms hanging straight by his side like he was waiting for something deeper than a car. Jesse leaned over and pushed the passenger window down a little. "See, Miller?" The man didn't answer, just walked around and slid into the back seat behind Jesse without a word. Jesse didn't hear the door shut, exactly. It was more like the air changed around him, like the pressure in the cab dropped by a few degrees. "All right," Jesse said, watching him in the rearview mirror. "Heading over to Lake Air, right?" Still no response. The man was looking out the window, face half lit by the passing streetlights, but Jesse couldn't make out much. Just pale skin and dark hair that looked slick with either sweat or something else. The eyes didn't blink. He pulled back onto the road and tried again. "You okay back there?" The man slowly turned his face toward the mirror, but didn't speak. Jesse's chest prickled, like he'd just stepped into a freezer from a summer day. Something about the way the man's mouth pulled up into a crooked smile, it wasn't right. It was too wide, too deliberate, like someone trying to copy what a smile looked like from a photograph. The lights flickered on the dashboard, just for a second. Jesse gave the mirror a quick wipe with his hand, figuring it was just grime messing with the reflection. But when he looked back up, the smile was wider. And now the man's eyes were locked on his. "Look, if something's wrong," he turned around just a little to glance back. Empty seat. Jesse froze. His heart did this strange little hiccup, like it missed a beat entirely and then slammed back into rhythm. He blinked hard, shook his head, and turned fully around. No one. The back seat was bare, seatbelt unused. No indentation in the cushion, no scent of cologne or sweat. Just silence. He snapped his head back to the mirror. The man was still there, still smiling, still staring. Jesse slammed the brakes. The car jerked to a stop near an old Shell station, and the tires screeched loud enough to wake ghosts. He whipped around again, hand reaching for the tire iron under the seat. Still nothing in the back. No door had opened. Nothing had moved. But his skin was crawling, every hair on his arms and neck standing like antennae. He checked the app. Still said the ride was active. Drop off in 11 minutes. But the name? It was gone now. Just a gray silhouette where the profile pic had been, and no name. Like the system had glitched or something, or worse, like it had never been there. Jesse cursed under his breath, turned the car back on, and started driving again. He didn't want to call anyone, didn't want to sound crazy, but he reached over to the glove box and slipped out the small cross his wife used to hang on her rearview mirror. She said it brought her peace. He hadn't touched it since she died, but now it felt like the right thing to do. He hooked it onto the mirror with one shaky hand. The man was gone. For the next few blocks, Jesse felt like a fool. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe he was just seeing things. Stress, heat, grief, all of it piling up. But as he passed through a stretch of road near the edge of Cameron Park, the temperature dropped again, fast, like stepping into a walk-in freezer, and the man was back. His face in the mirror was clearer now. The skin wasn't just pale, it was ashen, like wet cement. The eyes were too dark, too deep, as if they had no bottom. And the smile, it had grown. Split his face too far, stretched it until the corners of his lips looked torn. Jesse couldn't breathe. His hands locked on the steering wheel. He didn't know what to do. He didn't want to look at the mirror, but he couldn't stop. He felt watched, studied, like a bug under glass. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked in his throat. "What do you want from me?" The man didn't answer, but Jesse saw something else in the mirror now. The back seat wasn't just empty. It was changing, growing darker. Like a shadow was creeping outward, not from the corners, but from the very middle of the seat, as if it was leaking something ancient and wrong. The radio crackled, even though it was off. Static buzzed and then settled into a whisper. At first, Jesse thought it was just noise, but then the whisper began to shape itself into words. Almost. Home. The voice was his own. He slammed the gas pedal. He didn't care about the destination anymore. He just needed light, people, noise, anything to break this thing, this spell. He sped through red lights, tore past the lake, heart pounding so hard it made his vision pulse. The whisper came again, louder. "You left her alone." Jesse's stomach turned cold. That voice, still his, but warped, wasn't just talking about some passenger. It was about his wife. The one he hadn't been home with when she passed. He'd been at the shop late. They told him she had called out for him. I tried, he said aloud, tears burning his eyes. I didn't mean to. The rearview mirror. Cracked dot just like that. A line running from corner to corner like lightning. The man's face behind the crack was distorted now, but still smiling. And the smile was all teeth. Jesse swerved into the first parking lot. He saw an old diner off Valley Mills, long since closed down. Weeds grew through the concrete. The neon sign buzzed half-lit in the shape of a coffee mug. He slammed the car into park, jumped out, and ran a few steps before he turned back. The car was empty. No shadow. No whisper. No cracked mirror. The air was warm again, but the app still said the ride was active. Drop off in 4 minutes. Now, standing in the soft glow of the diner sign, Jesse heard the back door of his car open. Smooth, slow, like a polite guest letting themselves out. He turned in time to see the door shutting gently. The seat empty once more, but the mirror, he never touched it again. He left the car running and walked down the street toward a gas station, leaving his phone, his keys, everything behind. They found the car hours later, still idling in the lot, still with the app running. The dash cam? It played the footage clear as day. Jesse driving, talking, crying, and in the backseat, in every frame, a man with no name, smiling, wider each mile. It started the first week of July, during one of those Texas heat waves that makes the asphalt bubble and the air shimmer like something alive. Most nights, Javier Ortiz drove for Lone Star Rideshare, putting in 6-7 hours between 8 p.m. and 2 a.m., cruising from Midland to Odessa, sometimes all the way out past Andrews if the pay was good. He didn't mind the night work. Less traffic, less heat, and fewer entitled drunk kids vomiting in the back seat. His car was clean, a white 2016 Camry with leather seats and an aftermarket, a sea that blew cold enough to freeze your knuckles to the steering wheel. The app kept him busy enough most nights. But on July 6th, something new showed up. Ping. The address was just coordinates. No house number, no street name. Just a spot marked by latitude and longitude somewhere off Farm to Market Road 1788 north of Midland. The writer's name was always the same, Mary B. No profile picture, no rating, no ride history. The fare was decent, $17 to Odessa, but it was the location that caught his eye. He knew that stretch of road, had driven it more than a dozen times. And he knew damn well there was nothing out there except dust, oil pump jacks, and an old housing development that had burned down in the 90s. A gas leak or something, the story went. Some say arson. All that was left now were foundation slabs, some half-melted rebar, and scorched desert earth. He declined the ride. But the next night, it came again. Same ping, same Mary B. Same coordinates. He was in Odessa at the time, tired and ready to head back home. But curiosity scratched at him, low and slow, like a dog pawing under a door. So he accepted the ride, turned the Camry around, and headed west on 191, cutting north at the junction. It was 1:22 a.m. when he pulled off onto a dirt patch near the coordinates. His headlights swept over the crumbled concrete foundations. Dust rose in slow plumes. There was no house, no lights, no signs of life. Just emptiness and the whisper of hot wind curling through the broken brush. He waited 5 minutes. No one came. He messaged the writer through the app. "Here at the pin? Anyone around?" No response. He canceled and headed home. But that was only the beginning. For the next 7 nights, like clockwork, Mary B. requested a ride at exactly 1:22 a.m., same location. Same fare, no changes. Other drivers in the Midland group chat mentioned it too, joking about the ghost ride. Most ignored it. A few accepted and found nothing. One guy, Leon, said he saw a figure near the edge of the concrete pads. A woman, maybe, pale and barefoot. But when his headlights hit her, she was gone. Just gone. Javier didn't believe in ghost stories. Not really, but he believed in patterns. And this one itched at him. So on the 8th night, he brought a flashlight, a full thermos of coffee, and a Glock .43 he kept in the glove compartment. He got to the spot at 1:15 and parked. Turned the car off. Sat in the stillness. The ping came unscheduled. He accepted. No one appeared. But this time, he got out. The ground felt oddly soft, like ash. He walked the perimeter of the nearest foundation, the concrete cracked and sunken. In places, his flashlight caught fragments, an old porcelain knob, a twisted bed frame, what might have once been a child's tricycle melted down to its skeletal frame. There were scorch marks in the dirt, long faded but still there. In one corner, he found something strange. A ring of stones like a fire pit, but wrong somehow. Too perfect. Too clean. There was no soot inside, no ash. Just smooth, hard-packed earth that smelled faintly of sulfur. Then he heard the voice. It was faint at first, carried on the wind, like a hum you couldn't quite place. Javier RRR ... He froze, turned full circle with the flashlight. Who's there? He called out. No answer. He moved toward the ring of stones, heart thudding in his chest. The air felt heavy now, like the kind of pressure that comes before a storm. Then his phone rang. It was the app. The writer was calling. He stared at the screen. Mary B. He answered. Static. And then, underneath it, a whisper. You're late. He dropped the phone. The flashlight beam jerked and caught something just beyond. The foundation's movement, tall and slow. A figure standing motionless at the tree line. He raised the light, but it flickered, dying into dim yellow, then black. He backed away, stumbling over broken concrete, the soft ground shifting beneath him like a sponge. Back in the car, he locked. The doors started the engine and gunned it, but the rearview mirror showed something that froze his hands on the wheel. There was someone sitting in the back seat, a woman, hair hanging wet over her face, skin blackened and peeling in places. She wore what looked like a white dress, scorched along the hem, and she was smiling, wide and cracked like burnt porcelain. He turned around. Nothing there. He looked back at the mirror, still there. And then she whispered again, You're late. The car veered. He fought the wheel, swerved back onto the road, sweat pouring from his face. When he looked back again, the seat was empty. He drove straight home, didn't stop, didn't breathe. He didn't drive for a few days after that. App kept sending the pings. Mary B. Still wanted her ride. Javier finally called a guy he knew, Tomas, a part-time driver and full-time conspiracy nut. The kind of guy who believes cell towers cooked your brain and that chupacabras were real. Tomas met him at a diner off I-20, brought printouts, old news clippings. There had been a fire in 1996. A woman and her daughter died. Husband went missing. Arson was suspected, but nothing was proven. The girl's name wasn't listed, but the woman? Mary Beth Carson, Mary B. Tomas said locals believed the house burned from the inside out, that the husband had gone mad, locked them in, that some nights people still heard screaming, that no grass ever grew on the lot again. Javier wanted to scoff, but he remembered the feel of the earth under his boots, the smell. The next night, the ping came again. 1:22 a.m. He stared at it. Declined. But something had changed. The following night, the ping came earlier, 12:45 a.m., then 12 o'clock, then 11:32. Each night, it came a few minutes sooner. He uninstalled the app. It still pinged not on his phone, but through his car's onboard display. Then his smart TV, his laptop, anything with a speaker. Ride request from Mary B. It was like she was getting closer. Javier stopped sleeping. He boarded up the windows, started drinking again. He swore he heard footsteps outside at night, soft and even, crunching on the gravel of his driveway. Once he opened the door fast, shotgun raised, only to find a faint scorch mark on his welcome mat. Another time, he smelled sulfur in the hallway, and then came the dream, or maybe it wasn't. He was back at the lot, standing over that stone ring. The air smelled of burning hair and something else, something thick and coppery. He looked down. Into the pit. It wasn't empty. It was full of bodies. Burned. Melted. And smiling. When he woke up, there were ashes on his sheets. He fled the next morning. Packed a duffel, left his phone behind, drove east past Abilene, through Dallas, kept going. Motel to motel. No cards. No electronics. Cash only. But the ping still came. The last anyone heard of Javier Ortiz was a blurry photo posted in the Lone Star Driver group. A trucker said he saw him walking barefoot along the edge of Highway 31 near Tyler, clothes torn, skin blackened in places, muttering to himself. The caption read, "He kept saying she was still waiting, and the ride request? It just pinged again." She hadn't even meant to take the ride. Her car had broken down on the edge of Roscoe, Texas, in the dead heat of July. A cracked timing belt, according to the mechanic, who barely glanced under the hood before lighting a cigarette and muttering, "Ain't no fixing that today." The bus wasn't coming for hours, and her motel room had already been given away. She stood outside the diner off US 84, her suitcase sweating oil-stained moisture through its canvas shell, when the silver Impala rolled up beside her and the window dropped. The man behind the wheel looked to be in his late 40s, square jaw, farmer's tan, and a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You heading west?" he asked. "I'm going all the way to Lubbock if you need a lift." She hesitated, but the Texas sun was chewing through her skin, and the thought of waiting 6 more hours for a ride felt worse than trusting a stranger. "Yeah," she said. "Lubbock, that'd be great." She climbed in, and the door shut with a deep, muffled thunk, like something padded beneath the metal. She buckled up. The air conditioning was cool, though it carried a faint mildew odor, like it hadn't been run in a while. They drove for a while in silence, the road stretching long and flat through dry fields and barbed wire fences, dotted with rusted-out tractors and the ghosts of barns long since caved in. She watched the dust devils spin and unwind in the distance and didn't speak until they were 20 minutes out. "I'm Casey," she offered. "Dean," he replied without, glancing away from the road. "You from Lubbock?" "Born there." "Headed back after visiting my cousin in Abilene? You?" "I'm just passing through," he said, and that was all. No elaboration, no stories. Just two strangers moving through the state together. She tried not to overthink it. They were just outside Snyder when the sound started. At first, it was faint, just a soft hiccup beneath the growl of the tires and the low hum of the radio. She thought it might be something in the engine, a rattle or a loose bit of trim. Then it rose again, a whimpering, thin and desperate, like a child trying not to cry but failing. It came from behind her. She turned her head. The back seat was empty. The noise wasn't. "Do you hear that?" she asked, adjusting her seat to listen. Dean didn't answer. The whimpering came again, more insistent this time. There was no mistaking it now. Someone was crying. Not loudly, but enough. Enough to curl into your skin and start to fester. "Is that?" she began, but Dean turned the volume knob on the radio and the music surged. Classic rock, Maybe Zeppelin or some other band her dad would have played on long road trips when she was a kid. It filled the space between them, swallowed the sound. She looked at him, waiting. "Dean," she said, "there's someone in the trunk." He didn't look at her. His hands gripped the steering wheel just a little too tightly. "It's better not to ask," he said. Casey blinked. "What?" He turned slightly, just enough to glance at her from the corner of his eye. "Whatever you think you heard, you didn't." "But don't," he said, and there was a chill in that single word, the kind that makes your spine go stiff like a struck tuning fork. "Just don't." She sat back, stunned, staring out the windshield. The road rolled on in silence now, even the radio turned down to a whisper, but the crying continued. A hiccup, a sob, then silence again, as if whoever was back there knew they were being listened to. An hour passed, then another. The road blurred in the heat, the endless miles of flat, dry nothing weighing down on her. She wanted to believe it was a recording, maybe some sick prank, but the sobs would rise at random, too human, too real. And there was something in them, something broken. She tried texting someone, but there was no signal. Her phone just blinked no service over and over like a warning dot as they passed through post. She couldn't take it anymore. "Pull over," she said. "I need a break." Dean didn't slow down. "There's nothing out here. I don't care. I have to pee." "Just stop." He sighed but turned off the highway onto a narrow dirt road lined with mesquite trees and old fence posts. He parked on the shoulder, dust rising around them in slow, lazy clouds. She stepped out quickly, gulping the hot air like it might steady her, and pretended to walk into the brush. But once she was out of his sight, she circled behind the car, keeping her steps light. The crying had stopped. She stood at the trunk and pressed her ear to the metal. Nothing. She tried the latch. Locked. "Get back in the car." Dean's voice said from behind her. She spun around. He was standing outside the driver's door now, arms folded, that polite smile gone. "Now," she took a step back. "You're not going to help them," he said. "You're just going to make it worse." "What's in there?" she asked, trying to sound strong, but her voice cracked on the last word. He stared at her for a long time, his face unreadable. Then he said, "There's things in this world that don't let go. People think they leave bad places behind them, but sometimes bad things get in, and once they're inside, they stay." He nodded at the trunk. "I thought I was helping. I really did. But now she cries. Every time I drive, and if I stop." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Casey backed away, hands trembling. "You kidnapped someone?" "No," he said, almost gently. "I buried her." He looked up, and for the first time she saw something behind his eyes, terror, deep and old, like something living just beneath the surface of a frozen lake. "She died 3 years ago, but I still hear her." The wind shifted. The sobbing started again. Only this time it was louder, more desperate, like she knew Casey was there. "Open it," Casey whispered. Dean didn't move. "Open it, Dean." "Let her out." "I've tried," he said, voice cracking. "God help me, I've tried. But it's not locked. Not really. It's her. She won't leave. She won't." They stood there in the Texas sun, heat baking the dirt beneath their feet, while the crying grew louder and louder until it wasn't crying anymore. It was wailing, shrieking, a sound that didn't belong in this world. Dean dropped to his knees, hands over his ears, whispering something she couldn't hear. Casey turned and ran. She didn't know where she was going, just a way back up. The road, through the brush, past a dead fence line and an old billboard for a steakhouse long closed. She ran until her legs gave out. When she made it to a gas station on the edge of Justisburg, she told the clerk everything. The man behind the counter nodded slowly, like he'd heard something like it before. Called the sheriff, who called another deputy, and by the time they got out to the dirt road, the Impala was gone. No tire marks, no trace. Just empty dust and heat. They said there hadn't been anyone named Dean registered with a vehicle like that in the last decade. No accident reports, no missing person matching that name, nothing. And that was the end of it. Only Casey still hears it. Sometimes at night, when the wind's just right and the traffic's thin, she swears she hears it again, that soft, stifled sobbing from a trunk that never stays buried. She'd had a long day. The kind that starts off with cold coffee and ends with sore feet, aching shoulders, and a half-dead phone. Gina had pulled an extra shift at the medical clinic in San Antonio, and by the time the closing hours rolled in, she just wanted to get home, peel off her scrubs, and fall into bed. Her phone was at 6%, just enough to request a ride and get a quick scroll through her messages if she didn't waste time. She opened the Rideshare app, punched in her home address and hello, it's about a 30-minute ride out west, and waited. A silver Nissan Altima pinged nearby. License plate 6LF7129. Driver's name was Darren. 4.9 stars. That was good enough. The car pulled up smooth and silent outside the clinic entrance. It looked clean. Dark-tinted windows. She slid into the back, thanked the driver, and buckled up. Darren nodded without saying anything. Mid-40s, beard trimmed close, a faded baseball cap low over his brow. He didn't make eye contact, but that wasn't unusual. Some drivers didn't. Like small talk. She wasn't in the mood either. As they pulled out onto the street, the app showed the usual route. I-10 west for a while. Exit near Loop 1604. Then wind into the residential streets where her apartment sat tucked behind a church and a rundown gas station. She stared at the map absently, letting the blue dot follow its way across the screen. But then, something shifted. The car didn't turn where it should have. It passed up the on-ramp to I-10, rolled through a yellow light, and veered onto a back street instead. Gina blinked, sat up straighter. She looked down at her phone. The map was still showing the original route, the blue dot pulsing slowly, but now it wasn't following the suggested line. It was going off on its own. She leaned forward. "Hey, I think you missed the highway entrance." The driver said nothing. She cleared her throat. "Sir, this isn't the normal way." Still nothing. He kept driving, eyes fixed ahead. The dashboard. GPS screen showed a route, but it wasn't the one on her phone. It was a winding red line through unfamiliar neighborhoods, zigzagging like a maze. The street names weren't showing up, only numbers and letters. B1, C3, D9. She tried to swipe the app to cancel the ride, but the screen froze. The app went dark. Then her phone flickered, as if hit by static, and shut off entirely. "Battery dead." "No," she muttered. Crap, no." Gina glanced out the window. They were already deep into unfamiliar territory. Narrow streets. Fewer lights. Houses that looked half-finished or long abandoned. No cars parked, no porch lights glowing. Just dark outlines of buildings and the occasional empty swing set creaking in a yard. Her heart started to thump harder. "Look, can you just pull over?" "I think I'd rather get out here," she said, trying to keep her voice even. Darren didn't blink. His hands gripped the wheel tighter. She saw his knuckles whitening. But he didn't look angry. He didn't look anything. His face was blank. Like he was in a trance. She tried the door handle. Locked. She reached for the other side. Also locked. Her breath started to come faster. She leaned forward again and tapped his shoulder, harder this time. "Sir, you need to stop the car. Right now." He finally spoke. Quiet. A voice like gravel dragging across pavement. "We're almost there." "Almost where?" she asked, panic edging in now, but he didn't answer. They passed another street, no sign. No lights, just a gravel path and a mailbox half sunk into the ground. Her fingers trembled as she checked the dash again. The temperature readout blinked. 44 degrees Fahrenheit. That didn't make sense. It had been in the 70s all evening. Her chest tightened. Then she saw something else on the dashboard screen. A small icon in the corner. A symbol. It looked like an eye. Just blinking slowly. Watching Dot, she sank back into the seat, heart pounding against her ribs. Her fingers moved down her side to her purse, fumbling for anything pepper spray. Her small keychain flashlight, her house keys. Anything that might double as a weapon. But her mind was blurring, spiraling fast. Every window they passed looked the same. Same dark house. Same chain link fence. Same dead tree leaning toward the curb like it was whispering secrets to the pew. Ground out, she started to cry. Quiet at first. Then louder. The car turned again. Another sharp left. Another street she didn't recognize. And that's when she saw something terrifying in its simplicity. They had never passed the same street twice. But they had passed the same exact house 4 times. She recognized it now. The yellow siding. The broken window on the 2nd floor. The lawn with 2 rusted tricycles tipped over, same way each time. She couldn't explain it, couldn't understand how they kept coming back to it, but it was happening. She screamed then. Let me out. The driver didn't even blink. We're almost there, he repeated. Dot, her knuckles pounded against the window. Her throat was raw. She kicked at the seat. Nothing mattered. The world outside felt wrong. The air was heavier. Time itself felt folded, crumpled in on itself. And somewhere in the distance, behind the houses and fences, she thought she saw something standing tall. Watching Dot, it looked like a radio tower. But at WSN single quotes T. It moved. Suddenly the car stopped. It wasn't a screech or a swerve. It was like the car had been picked up and placed in this spot. Everything around her was dead silent. They were in front of a field. Fenced off. Beyond it was a dense tree line, blacker than anything she'd ever seen. And nestled just in front of the woods was a house identical to the one they'd kept circling. But this one had all its windows open, and every window had a face looking. Out. Not moving, not blinking, just watching. She turned back to the driver. He was crying, silent tears. But he still didn't move. I'm sorry, he whispered. They told me I had to. Who? She begged. He just looked at the house. The locks clicked. Everyone. Her door slowly creaked, opened by itself. The air outside was colder than anything she'd felt. Her body didn't want to move. But her legs did, against her will. Like she was being pulled. She screamed again, clinging to the doorframe, but her body kept going, feet scraping gravel, eyes locked on the open front door, and just before she crossed the threshold, she turned to look back. The car was gone. No engine, no lights, no Darren. Nothing but wind pushing dust across the dirt road. They never found her. The ride ended in the app at 11:42 p.m. Her last known location pinged in an unregistered zone west of the city, an area with no paved roads, no recorded addresses, and no signal. A place that wasn't supposed to exist. Every attempt to trace. The car failed. Every frame of traffic cam footage showed her getting into a car that didn't match the plate, didn't match the make, didn't even match the driver's face. It looked like her. But at WSN single quotes T. And still, some nights, drivers report getting a ping near Halotes. Always late. Always headed to an address that doesn't show up on any map. The request comes from Gina's name. And when they get close, their GPS screens flicker. Their maps go blank and the road starts to twist in ways that don't make sense. But they never pass the same street twice. The rain hadn't let up for 3 days straight. Not the kind that just drizzled or tapped on the roof like a sleepy lullaby, but the kind that crashed down like it had something to prove. In towns all across East Texas, the rivers were swollen, the creeks boiling out of their banks, and the roads, most of them, were already underwater. But people still tried to move, some out of panic, some out of sheer bad luck, others because something worse than weather was pushing them forward. Derek Alvarez hadn't intended to be out past dark, not with the radio issuing warnings every 10 minutes and sirens going off in the distance like war drums. But when he'd agreed to drive old Mr. Brody home from the dialysis center, he figured it'd be a quick favor. One back road through Woodlock, cut across the service road near the edge of Conroe, and drop the man at his double-wide off Pine. Needles Drive. Easy. Done it a dozen times before, but this night wasn't like before. The world was different. The sky didn't just hang heavy, it pressed down, thick and low like a lid on a boiling pot. The rain pounded the windshield so hard it sounded like gravel. The wipers slapped back and forth in a frenzy, barely keeping up. Derek squinted, leaned forward over the wheel, jaw tight, eyes scanning the puddled road that shimmered with every street lamp they passed. Only there weren't many left. Most had gone out. He glanced in the rearview mirror. Mr. Brody sat slumped. In the back seat, bundled in a beige windbreaker, head cocked to the side like he'd fallen asleep. But he wasn't sleeping. He was mumbling, soft, rhythmic. Like he was reciting something over and over, maybe a prayer. Maybe just the ghost fragments of some old song lodged deep in his fading mind. "Mr. Brody?" Derek called out. "Where?" "Almost there, all right? Just hang tight." But the old man didn't answer. He just kept whispering. The service road was already half submerged when Derek turned onto it, tires hissing through the rising water. A few minutes later, the road dipped lower and the truck groaned as it rolled into deeper flood. He tapped the brakes, just for a second, but that was enough. From the back seat, Brody's voice snapped to attention. "Don't stop." "What?" "Keep going," he said, louder now. "Don't stop. They're behind us." Derek's heart gave a little jump. "What are you talking about?" "They're behind us," Brody rasped. "They wait in the high water. Always have. Always will. You stop, they climb in. You keep going, maybe they don't catch." Derek turned in his seat, expecting to see some kind of grin, some sign the old man was playing him. But there was no humor in Brody's face. Just raw, wide-eyed fear. "I think maybe we should." Before he could finish, the truck jolted. As something slammed against the passenger side, not debris, not a branch, it was solid. It thudded once, then scraped. A dragging noise. Metal on metal. Derek stared through the window, but all he could see were shadows dancing between the rain streaks. The water outside had reached the doors, sloshing up against the seals. "I'm turning around," he muttered, hands moving to the wheel. "You turn around." "We die," Brody snapped. "You back up, they know. They see fear. They smell it in." The brakes, and then the truck rocked again. Harder this time. Like something had pulled on the undercarriage. Derek's knuckles turned white on the steering wheel. He pressed the gas. The engine roared. The truck surged forward, but there was no road anymore. What lay ahead was a lake where asphalt used to be. The rain had swallowed it whole, and the outlines of buildings stood half submerged in the distance like ruins of some ancient place. Traffic lights dangled uselessly above the waterline, blinking red into nothing. "You knew this would happen," Derek said, voice thin now. "I didn't know it'd be tonight." Brody replied, eyes never leaving the darkness outside the window. "But they come every flood. Always just beneath the surface. Things that remember before this land had names." Derek's voice broke. "That's not possible." Brody smiled, thin and bitter. Ain't nothing impossible in Texas after midnight. They passed a sedan half underwater. Its doors were wide open. No one inside. Just wet, crumpled seats and a child's shoe floating near the center console. Derek swallowed hard and kept driving. He didn't know where he was going now. The app had long stopped working. GPS just spun in a confused loop. But Brody kept whispering directions left at the collapsed billboard, straight past the drowned Sonic, right where the cypress trees stood like pale sentinels in the water dot, and the whole time, things kept moving in the flood around them. Long shapes, dark coils. Sometimes they thumped the truck. Sometimes they just swam beside it, pacing like wolves. Once Derek thought he saw a face, pale and long, pressed against the driver's side window. Not human. Too narrow. Too many teeth. He didn't look again. The truck began to sputter as water leaked into the engine. The dashboard flickered. The steering grew heavy. "I can't keep going," he said, breath ragged. "We're gonna stall." Brody didn't answer. He just reached into the folds of his windbreaker and pulled out something small and black. Derek saw it for a moment before the truck lights died entirely. A photo. Old, faded. A woman and a boy. Smiling in front of a dock. "They took her," Brody whispered. "Flood of '78. Same place. Same storm. I walked out. She didn't." Lightning lit up the sky in violent white arcs. In that flash, Derek saw them. Dozens of them. All around the truck, waist deep in water. Thin and gray, with gaping mouths and arms too long. They weren't swimming, they were walking. "Drive," Brody whispered. "We're stuck. Drive." Derek slammed his foot down, and the truck lurched one last time. Wheels spinning through water, through mud, through whatever lay beneath. The thing screamed high, sharp, warbling like sirens through a broken speaker. One of them reached across the hood, and its hand smacked the windshield. 5 fingers, no nails. Just wet, swollen flesh dot, and then they were clear. The truck jerked free and hit dry ground. They drove in silence for nearly 15 minutes, neither man speaking. When Derek finally turned, Brody was slumped again, the photo still in his hand. But he wasn't breathing. He wasn't warm. Either dot the truck coasted to a stop on a dry shoulder. The rain had eased to a drizzle. In the rearview mirror, Derek saw the water behind him rippling. Something pale and long trailing behind the last curl of current dot. They weren't behind him anymore. They were waiting for the next flood. For the next driver who thought the rain was just rain and the road was still a road. And somewhere, deep in that water, a child's shoe still floated. It started like any other night for Cal Turner, who'd been driving for Quick Ride in San Antonio for a little over a year. He worked the late shifts, the after 10 p.m. crowd, because that's when the real money came in bar hoppers, night, shift workers, airport runs, and yeah, sometimes the weirdos. But Cal didn't mind weird. He'd been a bouncer for 10 years before this gig, and there wasn't much he hadn't seen. Besides, San Antonio at night was different, quieter, like the city held its breath. Cal liked that silence, especially when the highway stretched out in front of him like a ribbon of black glass, the dashboard lights casting a glow across. His hands. He was parked off Navarro Street near the Pearl District around midnight when the request came in. It was odd from the jump. The app pinged a pickup near the Riverwalk, but the dot wasn't on any road. It hovered just off the waterline near a patch of brush behind the old crumbling mission church no one went near after dark. Cal frowned. But it wasn't the first time the app glitched. He accepted the ride dot as he drove down the narrow roads. Streetlights grew sparse. The Spanish moss in the oaks hung lower, almost brushing the top of his windshield. He slowed, headlights cutting through the fog that had rolled in off the water. His tires crunched gravel as he rolled to a stop near the location marker. He tapped his horn lightly, eyes flicking to the rear view. That's when he saw him. Man just appeared. No footsteps, no rustling through the brush. 1 second there was nothing. The next he was standing at the passenger side rear door, looking straight at Cal through the tinted glass. Mid-30s maybe, medium build, dark. Hair slicked down like he'd stepped out of a storm. He wore a black button-down, soaked and clinging to his frame, and jeans that dripped with thick, dark mud. His eyes. Cal remembered them clearly. Not glowing, not red like in stories. Just cold, lifeless, like all the light had drained. Out. Cal hit the unlock. The man got in without a word. Where we headed? Cal asked, glancing at the app. The man didn't answer right away, just leaned forward slightly. Cal could smell the brine, like ocean water left in a bait bucket too long. Mixed with something older, mildew and dirt, maybe rot. The man's voice, when it finally came, was flat and quiet. Mission Burial Park. There was more than one in town, so Cal asked which one. The man didn't clarify, just said again, Mission Burial Park. Then he leaned back and stared out the window. Cal picked the one closest to the old missions. Figured that made the most sense. The ride was quiet, eerily so. Cal liked silence, sure, but this was the kind that crawled up your neck and made your scalp tighten. Even the radio crackled when he tried turning it on. Dead air. He glanced in the mirror. The guy was just staring out the window, not moving, not blinking. That's when Cal noticed it. The back seat was wet, not just damp like someone sat after. Rain, soaked, dark patches spreading along the fabric. He could smell it stronger now, like algae and pond scum. Cal wrinkled his nose. Hey man, you okay? You sick or something? I got napkins up front. No reply. Not even a twitch. Cal kept driving, hands tight on the wheel. The city passed by in fragments. A shuttered taqueria, an empty gas station glowing green in the dark, a cop car parked under an overpass with no one inside. Then the cemetery loomed. Ahead. Mission Burial Park, the one off Espada Road, backed up against the San Antonio River. Ancient live oaks lined the iron fence, their branches curled like fingers. The gate was closed, of course, chained with a rusted lock. Cal pulled up to the curb and turned to say something. The back seat was empty. No door had opened. No sound, just gone. The seat where he'd been, flooded. The water had pooled into the grooves of the upholstery. Bits of silt floated in it. Long strands of black riverweed clung to the headrest. And worst of all, a single footprint remained on the rubber floor mat. Bare, human, but not like any living foot. Cal stared at it, heart pounding. The heel was shredded, skinless, just a crater of meat and grit. The toes were bloated, peeling, the nails black and cracked. He nearly jumped out of the car. After a minute of breathing hard, Cal got out and circled the vehicle, scanning the cemetery gate. Nothing moved. Just the wind rattling the chains. He popped the trunk and pulled out the old towel he kept for emergencies, trying to mop up the mess. But the water wasn't just wet. It stained. Dark patches sank into the cloth like oil. And the smell. That reek of the Gulf. Except the Gulf was 140 miles away. Cal drove home with every window rolled down, the AC blasting to cover the stink. He scrubbed the back seat for an hour with bleach and Lysol until his hands were raw. Still, the scent clung. Still, the seat squelched underweight that wasn't there. The next night. Another ping. Same location. Same name. This time Cal didn't. Accept, but someone else did. He could see it on the screen. A driver named Henry. 30 minutes later, Cal's phone buzzed with a quick ride alert. Passenger no show. Cal tried to forget. He really did, but the app kept pinging every few nights. Same request, same time, and the reports started trickling in. Other drivers whispering in online forums about the man in soaked clothes. The one who asked for the cemetery and never made it there. One guy claimed he drove him all the way before the car stalled at the gates, only to find mud smeared across the inside of his windshield when he tried to restart. Another swore he saw the guy crawl out of the San Antonio River near Blue Star and just stand there. Eventually, Cal Quick Ride sold the car. Didn't tell the buyer about the smell in the backseat or how every time it rained, the water pooled in the exact spot where that man had sat. But sometimes, late at night, he hears a splash in the drainage ditch behind his apartment. Sometimes he wakes to find wet footprints leading from his door to his bedroom window. And he knows, deep down, that some fares never end. They just keep riding, waiting for a driver who won't ask questions, someone who will take them home. It was one of those late summer nights in East Texas where the humidity clings to your skin like a second layer, and even the bugs seem too tired to buzz. Elijah Forster was behind the wheel of his rust-colored Toyota Camry, working the midnight rideshare shift out of sheer necessity. Rent was overdue, the fridge was nearly empty, and his mom's heart medication wasn't going to pay for itself. He didn't like the night shift, much too many drunks. Too many weirdos, but it paid better, and most of the other drivers avoided the outskirts where the tips were surprisingly generous. Especially out near the pine thickets past Carthage, where the GPS got flaky and the streetlights disappeared altogether. That's where tonight's ping came from. The pickup location blinked on the screen. Old Laurel Road, just off Highway 79. No house number. No porch lights. No landmarks. Just the kind of place you instinctively drove past without slowing down. Elijah frowned, thumbed the air conditioner up a notch, and started down the highway, telling himself he'd cancel if anything felt off. He'd done it before, but he didn't cancel. The closer he got, the quieter everything became. Even the tires seemed to hum softer on the cracked asphalt. When he turned onto Old Laurel Road, his headlights carved out twin cones in the dense curtain of pine trees, branches bowed low like they were trying to listen. The road narrowed to barely more than a gravel path, and then he saw her. She was already standing by the side of the road, exactly at the pickup pin, like she'd been waiting all night. No car, no house nearby. Just her. She wore a dark dress that fluttered around her knees despite the still air, and her hair was long and dark and fell straight down over her shoulders like wet silk. Elijah instinctively slowed and tapped the window button. "You, request a ride?" She didn't answer, just opened the back passenger door and slipped inside with a whisper of fabric. No sound of her shoes hitting the floor mat. No creak of the old suspension. Just the door shutting softly. Elijah checked the mirror. The back seat was empty. He blinked once, twice. "Ma'am?" he said, not turning around, his voice thinner than he meant it to be. "You okay?" A voice drifted in, quiet and close. "I don't like being alone." Elijah jerked his head toward the mirror again. Still nothing in the back seat. Just the wrinkled seat cushion. No indentation. No shadow. But he could smell her now, something like lilacs and something else underneath it, something faintly metallic, like old coins or fresh blood. He hit the ride start button with a shaky thumb, praying that maybe she was just tiny and seated low. Out of view. Where to? "Keep driving," she whispered, the voice somehow near his ear and far away at the same time. He looked back again. Nothing. He cleared his throat. "I kinda need an address to just drive." So he did. The road twisted around itself like it didn't want to end. Trees got thicker. The GPS flickered and vanished. Even the cell signal bar dipped to 0. Elijah's knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. "You from around here?" he asked, trying to fill the silence that felt more like weight than absence. The voice came again. "Do you believe in things you can't see?" He swallowed. "Like ghosts? Like loneliness?" Her voice was soft, sad, even. Like someone who never made it home. Elijah's stomach tightened. "You okay back there?" "I used to ride with my sister," she said, her voice drifting like fog across the seat. "We sang along to the radio. She always let me pick the songs. One night we got lost and the woods looked just like this. We never made it out. She left me behind." Something about the way she said it, flat and final, chilled him. He tried to glance back again, but something deep in his bones told him not to. Not to break that barrier between the front seat and the back. He focused on the road, which was narrowing more now, the gravel turning to dirt, the canopy above so thick he couldn't see the sky. "Maybe we should turn around." "She said she'd come back," the voice said, closer now. It seemed to come from both the air vents and the floor mats, but she lied. A cold rush of air blew across the back of Elijah's neck, and the dashboard lights flickered. "She left me," the voice hissed. The smell changed. No more lilacs, just earth now. Wet, pungent, rotting earth. Like the kind that clings to old graves after a storm. And then he felt it. Pressure. The feeling of breath on the back of his neck. The unmistakable weight of someone leaning forward, their face inches from his own. "I don't like being alone anymore." Elijah slammed the brakes. The car skidded to a stop in the middle of the dirt path, tires kicking up a cloud of dust. He turned, heart pounding, and finally looked back. The seat was still empty, but the door, it was ajar. Not fully open, just cracked, like something had left. Or something had never really been there at all. He jumped out of the car, heart hammering. Eyes scanning the woods. No footsteps, no rustling. Just silence. The kind of silence that pushes against your ears, heavy and unnatural. He ran around to the back door and flung it open. Nothing. No shadow. No trace, but something caught his eye on the seat. A single strand of hair. Long, dark. Still damp. He stared at it. The seat was dry, the cushions untouched. But that one strand lay across the fabric like a signature. He slammed the door, heart thudding so loud he could barely think. Got back in, threw the car into reverse. Drove like hell until the GPS pinged back to life and the yellow glare of a Valero sign bled through the trees ahead like salvation. He parked at the gas station and stepped out, breathing heavy, light. People, a cashier mopping inside, civilization. And then he looked down. There were only his footprints in the gravel. Just his, from the driver's side. No prints at all on the other side of the car, not even where she'd stood. He got back in, started the car, and when he flicked his eyes to the rearview mirror, there it was. Her shadow. Not her. Just the shadow. It sat in the middle seat, vague and blurred like something burned into film. No face, just a smear of black where a head would be, arms curled unnaturally at its sides, not moving. But there, he blinked and it was gone. The seat was empty again. He didn't sleep that morning. He didn't drive again for 2 weeks. And even after that, he never accepted another pickup from Old Laurel Road, never even looked that way on the map. But every now and then, when he was alone on a back road at night, he'd check the rearview mirror and catch just a flicker, just the faintest hint of a shape behind him, like someone waiting or something, because shadows don't usually linger after people are gone, unless the shadow never belonged to them in the first place. It started like any other Saturday night in Galveston, sticky with ocean air and soft with the low sounds of laughter from the bars on Strand Street. Emma had just left a friend's beach condo after one too many drinks, her phone battery hanging. on by a thread and the salt still clinging to her skin. She ordered a ride through the app, watched the little car icon float toward her like a ghost ship on the map, and stepped out into the balmy night. The street was nearly empty, the occasional tourist stumbling past in flip-flops, the glow of neon signs bouncing off wet pavement. Her ride, a black sedan, maybe a Hyundai or something close, slid up beside her. The windows were tinted. The license plate matched. So she got in. The driver was a man in his late 40s, salt and pepper hair, a face like weathered granite. He gave her a nod and said her name flat, like he was reading it off a card. She told him where she lived, over near the East End, a quiet rental behind a seafood market, and he repeated it back. Everything seemed fine. Until a DIDN single quotes T. The first time they passed the broken motel sign, she thought nothing of it. It was Galveston. Old places, rust, salt damage, nothing ever fully repaired. It was a faded sign for something called Sea Breeze Inn, the B, dangling by a wire, barely holding on. The next time they passed it, 5 or 6 minutes later, she raised an eyebrow but said nothing. When they passed it a third time, the hair on her arms prickled. She leaned forward slightly. Hey, ... are we going in circles? The driver didn't answer right away. He kept his eyes fixed ahead, jaw tense, knuckles tight on the wheel. No, he finally said. We're making good time. She glanced down at her phone. The screen was black, dead. She pressed the power button. Nothing. Just that useless little spinning circle and a flash of battery red. She pressed the lock button again out of habit. Still nothing. The fourth time they passed that sign, Emma leaned forward more aggressively. That motel, that broken sign. We've passed it 4 times now. I'm not crazy. I told you, the man said, not looking at her. We're moving forward. But the streets, he grunted, something like a laugh but without humor. Street names don't mean much at night. City like this shifts around when no one's watching. What the hell does that mean? He didn't answer. And now that she was paying attention, she noticed something else. The streetlights didn't flicker, they blinked like eyes. The houses looked the same, but not quite. On one porch, a rocking chair moved back and forth, slowly, steadily, but no one was in it. On the next loop, the chair was still, but a dog stood there instead, staring at the car with glowing eyes and a mouth that looked like it had too many teeth. Emma sat back, her breath caught in her throat. Her heart was pounding so hard it made her stomach hurt. She knew this area, knew Galveston like the lines on her palm. This wasn't just a wrong turn. This was wrong. The driver didn't seem afraid. If anything, he looked bored. She asked again, more forcefully, "Why are we looping the same block?" He finally turned and looked at her, just for a second. His eyes were dark, too dark, no shine in them. Not all streets lead somewhere. Some of them are just meant to keep you moving until you figure it out. Figure what out? He didn't reply. He just tapped the side of the GPS screen with one finger. She leaned forward to look at it and felt her stomach flip. The screen was dark, just like her phone. No route, no location. Just a swirling, static void where the map should be. "I want to get out," she said. "Can't stop," he said. "Not yet. Let me the hell out of this car." But the doors didn't unlock when she tried the handle. She pounded the window. The glass didn't even rattle. She screamed at him. He didn't flinch. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "they get in the car, and they don't even know they're not supposed to leave." She felt a deep, cold knot form in her gut. "What did you say?" He looked in the rearview mirror and smiled. But the reflection wasn't his. It wasn't hers either. It was a woman with no eyes and wet black hair, like seaweed pulled from the bottom of the Gulf. Emma blinked and the reflection was gone, but the feeling stayed. that something else was in the car, breathing beside her. "I want out," she whispered. "You already got in," the man said. "That's the hard part. Most people don't even get that far. But leaving?" He made a sharp left turn. The motel sign flashed by the window again, only this time the B was gone entirely. And someone was standing under it. Emma craned her neck, trying to see as they passed, but the figure was already gone. The ride timer on the dash blinked once and went blank. She didn't know how long they'd been driving. Her sense of time was gone, swallowed up by that looping street. Her mouth tasted like salt. The air in the car had grown thick and humid. It smelled like mildew, like the inside of an abandoned cooler. "I don't live here," she said out loud, trying to convince herself. "I live past the causeway, on Driftwood Street. That's where I live." The driver said nothing. The car slowed slightly. She glanced out the window. The sign was gone. Not the motel, the whole sign, the pole, the concrete footing. It was just dirt now, and above it, no stars. Just black. She thought of jumping out. She didn't know how fast they were going. It didn't feel like movement anymore, just rotation. Like the world was still and the car was just spinning on the spot. She reached into her purse. No signal flares, of course. Just gum, lipstick, a half-crushed mascara wand. Her charger cable, useless. Her hand shook. Her vision blurred. She pressed her forehead to the window and whispered, "Please, please, please, The driver suddenly spoke, voice flat and cold. "You're starting to forget, aren't you?" "What?" "The details. Your house, your friends, even your name. You think you remember it, but it's slipping." She clenched her fists. "Shut up. They always think they know where they're going when they get in. But you've been on this street before. You just didn't recognize it." Not until it was too late. Her chest tightened. A sharp ache in her ribs, like pressure from the inside out. "I've never seen you in my life." He didn't respond. Just kept driving. Another left turn, another loop. The buildings were more decayed now. Windows boarded, trees skeletal. A stop sign sagged sideways into the street, covered in moss. She gritted her teeth. "If I'm dreaming, I want to wake up." "If you were dreaming," the driver said, "you wouldn't be able to feel this." And he reached back and grabbed her wrist, his hand ice cold and impossibly strong. She gasped, yanked away. Her skin burned where he touched it. She looked again at the rearview mirror. The woman was back, but this time closer. Behind her. In the car, mouth hanging open in a silent scream. Hair dripping onto the seat. Emma screamed and kicked the door. "Let Emmy out." The car stopped. Dead stop silence. No engine. No street noise. No wind. The door clicked. She didn't wait. She threw it open, stumbled out, and looked around. Her knees buckled. There was nothing. Just fog. No buildings, no signs, no street, no sky. Only the car behind her, door open, engine off, and the driver standing just outside it now, looking at her with that same bored expression. "You got out," he said. "Congratulations." She backed away into the fog. Her phone buzzed in her hand. New ride request, Seabreeze INN. 0.0 miles, 47 minutes. Her heart dropped. The screen glitched, flickered, and the phone went dark again. She turned around. The broken motel sign was back. This time her name was on it. Where the sea breeze had been. The wind picked up, thick with salt and something else, something like. DK. She walked. And behind her, the car door slowly shut, and the driver got back in. He picked up rides every weekend around San Antonio, mostly for the tips. His name was Reggie, and he'd been driving long enough to know which parts of town felt off. The Riverwalk tourists were easy money. The late-night college kids paid in drunken generosity, but the East Side past Loop 410? That part always made his shoulders knot up, especially near those abandoned warehouses and boarded-up storefronts. Still, he needed the cash. Gas wasn't getting cheaper. It was a Saturday night when he got the ping a pickup just off a half-lit industrial strip near Rigsby Avenue. The profile photo on the app was blank, and the name was just M. No stars, no ride history. Reggie hesitated. He hated picking up first-timers. They were unpredictable. But the fare was high, and he figured it was some kid who hadn't used the app before. He pulled into the cracked lot of an old bait and tackle shop that hadn't seen business in a decade. The sign swung slowly in the wind, squealing on rusted chains. Reggie left his engine running. He always did when it didn't feel right. He scanned the lot. No one. Then the passenger door opened without warning, fast and silent. The man slipped. In like fog, no footsteps, no weight to his movement. Reggie flinched and turned. The guy was pale, clean-shaven, maybe mid-40s, wearing a dusty black coat that looked like it belonged in another century. He was smiling, not in a friendly way, but wide too wide. His lips pulled back too far, exposing long, thin teeth, almost like a dog's. Reggie tried to keep it cool. "Where to, man?" The man didn't answer, just kept smiling. "All right," Reggie said, eyes on the road. "I'll just follow the drop-off in the app." They drove in silence. The man's head didn't move, but Reggie could feel his eyes on him, sharp, heavy, like pins in his skin. The GPS was glitchy. It kept rerouting. They circled through the same neighborhood twice. Reggie tapped the screen, frustrated. "Sorry, signal's weird here." Still nothing from the man. No nod, no breath. Just that smile. They finally came to a stop outside a row of old duplexes. Half of them were dark, and the ones that weren't had bars on the windows. The kind of street where porch lights burned out and never got replaced. "This the place?" Reggie asked, glancing into the rearview mirror. The man wasn't in the seat anymore. Reggie's breath hitched. His hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles blanched. He twisted around in the seat. Empty. Passenger door closed. He hadn't heard it open. He sat frozen for a few seconds, eyes wide, heart thudding in his throat. Then he heard something. A soft, dry sound like beans shaking in a jar. It was coming from the back seat. There was a small pouch on the seat now, tied shut with a drawstring. It hadn't been there before. Reggie stared at it. The pouch was made of old, cracked leather, the kind that looked oiled and softened over decades. It had a dark stain on the bottom, reddish-brown. He reached back slowly and picked it up. It was heavier than it looked, and something shifted inside with a faint clink, clink, clink. He set it in the cue folder and stared at it. Against every better instinct, every gut scream telling him to leave it alone, he opened it. Inside were teeth. Not just a few, dozens, human teeth. Small ones, like children's. Some stained, some cracked, some with roots still clinging to dried. Blood. Reggie threw the pouch down and stumbled out of the car, dry heaving onto the sidewalk. He stood there in the cold air, shaking, hard hammering, unable to breathe right. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A new message on the app. Thanks for the ride. No profile. No sender. Just the message. Reggie drove straight home, windows down, the night air cutting into him like blades. He didn't even stop to grab food like he always did. He parked outside his apartment and left the car running, door open. He couldn't sit in it any longer. That night, he didn't sleep. He kept hearing the pouch rattle in his mind, teeth rolling over each other like bones in a sack. When he finally drifted off near dawn, he woke up an hour later with a metallic taste in his mouth and the smell of old leather in his nose. He called the rideshare company first thing. They said no record of a passenger under the name M was in the system. No ride logged, no route taken. He tried to report the pouch, but they told him to contact the police. The police didn't believe him either. They inspected the pouch, sure, bagged it up, but they didn't say much. One of the officers, an older guy, held it for a long time, frowning, turning it in his hands like it was familiar. "You find this in a car?" the officer asked quietly. "Yeah," Reggie said. "Last night." The officer nodded once and told him he could go. Reggie asked what would happen with the pouch. The officer just said it would be handled. For a week, Reggie didn't drive. Couldn't, but money got tight, and eventually he got back behind the wheel. The car didn't feel the same. The seats creaked too much. The vents blew cold even with the heater on. And every time someone sat in the back, Reggie looked at their reflection in the mirror, watched their eyes, their hands, their mouths. 2 weeks later, he picked up a fare from downtown. Another blank profile. No stars, just a name. He canceled the ride instantly, pulled over, closed the app. But when he turned around, the pouch was back on the seat. Same leather. Same DRAWSTRNG dot this time. It was full to the brim. That night, he didn't go home. He drove out past the city limits toward a field he used to fish in as a kid. He got out, pouch in hand, and dug a hole with his bare hands, knuckles scraped raw. He buried the pouch deep and packed the earth down hard. Said a prayer he hadn't spoken since his mother passed. Then drove home with his hands trembling on the wheel. But the next morning, it was back in his car, sitting neatly in the middle of the back seat. Teeth gleaming like they'd been cleaned. Reggie stopped picking up passengers after that, sold the car, changed his number, moved north to Temple, started delivering groceries instead. Safer, less contact. Less unknowns dot, but sometimes on nights when the wind howls. Just right. He swears he hears something small and hard rolling around in his glove compartment. Even though he doesn't have one anymore dot, and once, when he dropped off a bag of ice, cream and cereal to a house just off West Adams Avenue, the woman answered the door with a smile too wide. She didn't say anything, just took the bag, handed him a tip, and closed the door. When he got back in the car and opened his palm, it wasn't cash dot, it was a tooth, tiny, child-sized dot with the root still red. He had just stepped outside to smoke. That's all it was. A quick moment on the curb in front of the truck stop diner just east of Amarillo, where the floodlights hummed overhead and the scent of fried grease mixed with diesel. His name was Cole Hartley, 39, divorced twice. Worked night dispatch for a freight brokerage out of Lubbock and liked his coffee strong and his quiet uninterrupted. It was just past midnight. He'd been driving for 2 hours, heading back from a weekend at his cousin's in Dalhart. He wasn't tired, not really, just restless. There was something about driving at night in the Panhandle. The way the road never seemed to end, and the dark rolled out like a black carpet that made your thoughts turn slippery. The phone buzzed in his coat pocket. When he pulled it out, the screen was already on. The Rideshare app was open. He didn't remember opening it. That was the first thing. The second thing was the notification. Your driver has arrived. No name, no license plate. Just the outline of a car in shadow on the map, parked right out front. He blinked out. There was no request history. No trip scheduled. Nothing in the recent activity log. The ride shouldn't exist, yet the sedan idling at the curb sure as hell did. Cole stared at it. A black Lincoln, glossy in the parking lot. Lights, cleaner than any car had a right to be on a dusty Texas night. No dirt on the wheels. No bug streaks on the grill. The windows were tinted a shade too dark for state compliance. No sticker, no rideshare symbol, not even a front license plate. He should have turned around. Should have gone back inside, paid for his pie and coffee, and driven off toward the glowing comfort of I-40. But the passenger door clicked open with a soft pop, like it knew he was watching, like it was inviting him in. He hesitated just long enough to feel stupid for hesitating. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe some poor bastard requested a ride to Amarillo and the app flipped the signals, but it was cold out. And curiosity, hell, that. Old itch got the better of him. He slid into the back seat. The car smelled like cedar and old paper, the kind of scent you got in a forgotten library. It was dark inside, impossibly so, despite the streetlight outside. There was no sound, no music, no radio, no seatbelt chime. Just the muffled hush of the car's interior. The driver didn't say a word, just nodded once in the mirror and pulled out of the lot, slow and deliberate. Cole's phone screen blinked again. No trip listed. Just an empty map. No ETA. No fare. No destination. He tried to speak just a simple, "Hey, where are we headed?" But his throat felt dry. The words stuck halfway up like they'd forgotten how to form. He coughed once, then again. The driver never looked back. They passed. The diner's glowing red sign. Cole turned to glance out the back window and saw nothing. No diner, no parking lot, no rows of semis lined up like sleeping beasts. Just blackness, flat and endless, swallowing everything. He spun around in his seat. His chest tightened. The road behind them was gone. Not too dark to see, gone. Not blurred by fog or distance, gone. Erased. As if they were the only car in existence and the universe behind them was being unwritten. "Hey," he managed to croak. "What the hell?" The driver didn't react. Hands steady on the wheel. No twitch. No shift. Cole leaned forward to tap the shoulder, but stopped short. The man, if it was a man, had no reflection in the mirror. The driver's seat looked occupied. The outline was there, sure. Shoulders. Head. A shadow of movement. But the mirror showed nothing. Just the back seat. Just Cole, pale and confused. He checked the windows. They no longer showed Amarillo or anything remotely Texan. The scenery had changed. It was all fences now. Endless lines of rusted chain link that stretched beyond the headlights, broken in places, sagging in others, topped with curls of barbed wire that gleamed like wet bones. Beyond them, thick black trees pressed up against the sky, gnarled and leafless, clawing at the clouds. Cole didn't know this place. It wasn't on any road he'd ever driven. It wasn't on any map. He grabbed his phone again. No signal, no Wi-Fi. Battery still at 78%, but the screen flickered with static for half a second before going black. Not off, just dead. His hand shook. "What is this?" he asked, louder this time. "Where are we going?" The driver tilted his head, just slightly, toward the side window. A gesture, not an answer. Cole looked. There was something running. Alongside the car now. In the trees. Keeping pace. Low to the ground, fast. Occasionally, in the flickers between trees, a shape would flash long limbs, sharp bends. Something too many jointed to be human. But not animal either. It watched him. He couldn't see eyes, but he felt them. Each time it ducked behind a trunk or a fence post, his skin crawled like ants under the surface. He pressed himself back against the seat, breathing fast, heart hammering. "This is a mistake," he whispered. "This isn't my ride. Let me out." Still no response. Still no roads behind them. He tried the door handle. Lock. Then he reached over to unlock it. Manually, there was no latch. Just seamless black leather. As if the car wasn't made to open. Road ahead twisted, a slow curve, curling like a question mark, leading deeper into woods that didn't belong in Texas. Tall, impossibly tall, with trunks wider than any tree had. Business being dot, and then they passed a sign dot. It was old, wooden, splintered, letters hand-carved in a language Cole didn't recognize, but he felt it in his bones. A name. His name. Cole Hartley. A chill rolled through him. This was no mistake. No glitch. He was expected. The car began to slow. Up ahead. The road ended. Not in a cul-de-sac. Not in a driveway. Just ended. Like the map had stopped being drawn. And at the edge of that ending was a house. It wasn't large. Looked like an old Texas ranch house from the 1920s, maybe. Wraparound porch. Sagging roof. Windows boarded up from the inside. No light. No path. Just sitting there in the middle of nowhere. The car rolled to a stop in front of it. The locks clicked open. Cole didn't move. The driver, if it even had a face still, hadn't turned around. The passenger door swung open by itself. Cold. Air blew in, sharp and metallic. Cole tried to speak, to scream, to refuse, but his legs moved anyway, as if commanded. As if the ride had only been the start of something older, something deeper, something that had known his name before he ever stepped into the world. He stepped out. The moment his boots hit the dirt, the car vanished behind him. No sound, no lights. Just gone. And then the house creaked. The front door opened. And from inside, something whispered his name, not through the air, but under it, like it was being carried through the roots beneath his feet. He walked forward. He had no choice. The road was gone. The car was gone. And whatever was waiting inside that house, it had been waiting a long, long time. He picked her up near dusk, right where the dirt met the last stretch of asphalt east of Laredo, on a road that barely qualified as paved anymore. She stood there alone, in cut-off jeans and a faded hoodie zipped to her chin, her arms folded tight, against the wind that came off the scrubland like a warning. The sun was low, all copper and blood orange in the rear view, and he almost didn't stop almost. But something in his gut twisted when he saw her face. Not recognition, not quite. More like a memory trying to dig its way out through the walls of his stomach. He rolled down the passenger window and leaned toward it, one hand still on the wheel. Need a ride? She didn't answer. Just walked around to the passenger side and opened the door like she'd already been invited. Slid in without a word. No bag, no phone, no glance back at the dying light behind them. He glanced over, meaning to ask where she was headed, but the question caught in his throat. She looked just like Lydia. Not a little. Not kind of. Not one of those eerie resemblances. That makes your heart clench for a second before your brain tells you you're being stupid. This was exact. The same two straight brown hair with one stubborn curl behind the left ear. The same hazel eyes with that golden ring around the pupils. Even the scar, God help him, the little crescent just under her chin where Lydia had fallen. Off her bike when she was 7. He remembered holding her afterward, bloody and crying and furious, and promising her it'd fade. It never really had. But Lydia had died 17 years ago. Drowned in Falcon Lake the summer she turned 14. Vanished for 2 days before they found her, bloated and gray and staring with wide, water-wrecked eyes. He'd buried her himself. Shoveled dirt with his own blistered hands because he couldn't bear to let anyone else do it. And yet, here, she was silent and staring out the windshield like nothing had ever happened. He cleared his throat. Where to? Still nothing. He tried again, softer this time. You from around here? She slowly turned her head toward him, eyes wide but empty. Not angry, not afraid. Just ... there. He gripped the wheel harder and tried not to shiver. You? Got a name? She opened her mouth but made no sound. Her lips moved just enough for him to make it out. Daddy. He almost swerved off the road. No, he whispered, his knuckles pale on the steering wheel. No, you don't get to say that. But she didn't answer, didn't react. Just turned her face back to the window, her breath fogging the glass. In small, steady clouds, he drove for miles without speaking, trying to calm the thud in his chest, the ice sliding down his back. The desert blurred past in a haze of dusk and dust. No cars. No towns. Just him and her, and the heavy air between them. Was the middle of nowhere, the kind of nowhere that swallowed people and never belched up bones. He glanced over again, needing to see if it was just the light, a trick of memory and desperation. But she was still there, that same scar, those same eyes, and something colder behind them now. A silence that stretched too far. He reached for the glove box and pulled out the photo. It was old and wrinkled from years of handling, the edges frayed like a flag left out in the wind too long. Lydia's school picture from 7th grade, taken just 3 weeks before she went under. He held it up beside her face. They matched, detail for detail. Even the faint line on the bridge of her nose from when she'd walked into a screen door. His throat felt like it was closing. What the hell is this? She didn't blink. Are you messing with me? His voice cracked. Is this some kind of sick prank? Who put you up to this? She turned slowly and smiled. It wasn't Lydia's smile. It was too wide. Too still. The temperature in the cab seemed to drop 5 degrees. He reached for the radio, needing to fill the silence with anything, static, music, the news, something normal. But the screen blinked and went dark as soon as his fingers touched the dial. The whole dash flickered, then died. No headlights, no engine hum, no movement. They coasted to a stop in the middle of the empty highway. His hands trembled on the wheel. He tried the ignition, nothing, not a click. The key wouldn't even turn. He looked out into the growing dark. No lights, no signs, no sound but the desert wind and his own heartbeat. When he looked back, the passenger seat was empty. No door had opened. No footsteps on the gravel. Just gone. He stared, heart pounding, then twisted to check the back seat. She was there, sitting behind him now, leaning forward, and she was crying. Silent tears ran down her cheeks, streaking her face in muddy lines, but her eyes weren't sad. They were angry, accusing. You left me, she whispered. No, he breathed. No, I didn't. I looked for you. You stopped. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. You stopped looking. You let them bury me. But I wasn't done. His breath hitched. You drowned. You were dead, baby. Her face changed. Not expression shape. Her features shifted, subtly but horribly. Lips peeled back too far. Eyes turned glassy and too wide, like they were filled with the lake water. I waited, she hissed. So cold down there, so dark. I waited. He reached for the door handle and pulled. It didn't budge. She reached for his shoulder. He screamed. Cab filled with water in one breathless rush. It poured in from nowhere, gushing from the vents, the cracks in the doors, the seams of the windshield. Cold and thick and black as oil. He tried to fight it, tried to kick, to break glass. But it was like being buried in a nightmare made of ice. He opened his mouth to scream again, and water filled his lungs. Then nothing. They found the truck 3 days later, empty, no damage. No sign of struggle, no footprints in the dirt around it. No tracks, like it had just stopped and died. The authorities ruled it an abandoned vehicle, another ghost rig in the desert. But some nights, drivers still see the truck, still running, still crawling slow along the back roads east of Laredo. And sometimes, if they pass close enough, they say you can see a girl in the passenger seat, crying. The car showed up on the app with a generic name, Sodden XL Black. No photo, no driver profile. The kind of listing most folks would skip, thinking it was a glitch or some under-the-radar new driver who hadn't set up their account. Yet, but for a lot of people in East Texas, those coming out of late bars in Beaumont or night shifts at the plastics plant in Port Arthur, it was just a ride. They didn't ask questions, especially not at 3 a.m. when your phone's at 8%. Your feet ache and you just want to get home. The strange thing wasn't that people got in. It was that some didn't get out. Not the usual vanishings you read about in Houston or Dallas. These were odd. The app would show completed rides, cards charged, routes logged. But the passengers? They just stopped existing. Phones would ring. Out. Apartments stayed untouched. A few parents filed missing person reports, but the car never showed up on traffic cams. No dashcam footage. No gas station check-ins. Nothing. The first survivor was a 21-year-old woman named Raina Holt from Nederland. It was her second week at the graveyard shift at the Valero refinery. She took the ride because her usual Uber guy Larry, a talkative man with 3 kids and a loud gospel playlist, wasn't working that night. The car was already waiting when she clocked out. Same basic listing, sedan XL black. She hesitated, but the driver waved at her through the windshield and smiled. Just a guy in his 30s, it looked like. Ball cap, beard, nothing strange. She got in. What Raina remembered wasn't the man's face. She said he never looked at her again after she got in. Didn't speak, didn't even acknowledge her. The music wasn't on, but the air was thick. Like someone had been breathing in that car for hours. Not just stale humid, wet. She tried rolling down the window, but the button didn't work. Then the seat under her started to shift. Slowly, like a low rise and fall. Not the way a suspension bounces on the road, but the way a stomach might move when someone's asleep. She put her hand down between the seat and the console. Said it was warm, damp, like skin. She panicked. Asked the driver to pull over. He didn't respond, didn't blink. That's when she said the rearview mirror turned on its own, angling to show her face. Her own reflection stared back at her, but the eyes in it weren't hers. They were deeper set, too dark, like they belonged to someone else entirely. The mouth in the mirror didn't move when she screamed. She jumped out at a red light. Took a shoulder roll that busted her knee and left asphalt burns all down her thigh. But she said it was the best pain she'd ever felt. The car just kept driving. No screech, no honk. It slid off like it hadn't even noticed she was gone. Police took her statement. EMTs treated her. But when they tried to run the car's license plate, it didn't exist. Not in any DMV system. Not in any make or model registry. The Vang she'd memorized was scrubbed cleared down to zeros and nonsense. Not even the app could find her ride history. They told her she must have hallucinated it, maybe hit her head and imagined it all. But they couldn't explain the charges. On her card or the screen recording she'd taken, seconds before she jumped just long enough to capture the timestamp and the route. The car never took a turn. It drove straight into the marshes and swamps east of town where no road should have gone. Raina moved out of state 2 weeks later. Never spoke to media again. But her story spread and people online started digging. A Reddit thread blew up, filled with similar reports. Always that same black sedan. No driver profile. No license match. And always at night, a trucker named Jacob Miles picked up on the pattern. He'd been driving the 287 corridor for over 20 years and had seen plenty of things: tornado wreckage, car fires, even a few jumpers. But this car, he said, wasn't normal. He'd passed it more than once between dusk and dawn, always gliding just ahead of him, never switching lanes, never signaling. One night, around 2 a.m. outside Palestine, he tailed it for 20 miles out of curiosity. When he flashed his brights to pass, The car slowed and slid behind him like it had eyes. But in the mirror, it was gone. Just disappeared. Like it had been erased frame by frame. Things escalated when a college kid named Darnell Thomas tried tracking it down on purpose. He was a senior at Lamar University and had read every story, mapped every sighting, even ran code to scan the right apps for similar ghost profiles. He got one ping, just one. Same title, same car, no image. He booked it. His roommate said he left the dorm around midnight, wearing a windbreaker and carrying a GoPro rig he'd strapped to his chest. Darnell was smart, cautious, paranoid even. But none of that helped. He never came back. His phone was found in a drainage ditch off Highway 73, still recording. The last frame was strange, not of the car or the driver. Just a close-up of the seat itself, pulsing like lungs inflating. And then a thin slit opened near the headrest, stretching slowly like a mouth yawning. Something slid out, wet, shiny. The footage ended there. When the police found the phone, the app had already removed the trip from the logs. They couldn't trace anything. Even his card wasn't charged. It was like he never left the room. There was one last report. An old mechanic in Jasper named Clive said he saw the car parked outside his shop around 4:15 in the morning. It wasn't. There the night before, no tire marks in the gravel, just there, idling. The engine made no noise, but the headlights pulsed like a heartbeat. Clive, being stubborn and old school, went out with a flashlight and a crowbar. When he looked, inside the car was empty. No driver, no interior even. Just a long, black, hollow space stretching back beyond where the trunk should have ended. And inside it, eyes, dozens, maybe more, watching, blinking in different rhythms. The air smelled like old water and rot. He backed away and threw a rag over the windshield. When he pulled the rag off seconds later, the car was gone. He closed his shop the next week and moved in with his daughter in Nacogdoches. Wouldn't talk to reporters. Wouldn't go near any vehicle newer than 1998. No one knows who or what made that car. Some say it's a patch of road-born cursed, a roaming ghost fueled by grief or vengeance. Others whisper about government, tests or failed AIs, but those theories don't explain the breathing, the shifting, the eyes. All that's known is this: if you see a black sedan waiting for you in the dark hours and your app doesn't have a photo, walk away, don't get in. No matter how tired, how drunk, how far from home you are. Because once the door closes, you may not come back. And even if you do, you won't be alone in that seat. Something will be breathing under you. Something hungry. Something that isn't done yet. He didn't usually drive past midnight anymore. Not since the last time, when he picked up a drunk kid in the rain outside of Temple who screamed the whole way to Belton, then left the backseat soaked and smelling like gin and vomit. That ride stuck with him longer than it should have. Something about the way the kid said, "I think something's in the trunk," just as he got out. But tonight was different. The air had a strange stillness to it. No wind, no insects chirping. The kind of quiet you get before a big storm rolls in, but the sky over Waco was clear and starless. His phone buzzed and he glanced at the screen. New fare. Pickup. Lakeshore Drive. Destination. TBD. Requested at 3 a.m. exactly. He thought about ignoring it. It was late. He was tired. But the payout looked good, too good for a local run. Maybe a college kid going to Dallas or someone catching a red-eye flight out of Austin. Long drives were rare gold these days. Gas wasn't cheap, and his rent sure as hell wasn't getting lower. So he accepted the ride and pulled out from his usual waiting spot behind the closed diner just off Loop 340. Lakeshore Drive curved along the Brazos like a crooked finger, houses thinning out the farther north you went. Most folks lived in modest bungalows or trailers tucked under oak trees, their porches lit dimly, if at all. By the time he reached the pinned pickup location, the road was little more than gravel, and the river was running dark and wide just past the tree line. There was no house, just an old boat launch that looked like it hadn't been used in a decade, with weeds growing through the cracks in the concrete. A single figure stood there in the dark, barely illuminated by his headlights. Tall, thin, dressed in black. They didn't speak when they got in. Just opened the rear door slowly and sat behind him. No hello, no greeting. The driver, a man named Earl, but his apt name was Gray Rides, cleared his throat and glanced at the rear view. Where to? He asked. The figure's voice was quiet but clear. Just drive. Earl hesitated, fingers hovering over the app. It still said, destination TBD. No address. No update. Double quote, sir. I need something to plug in, he said. Even just a direction. The man said nothing, just stared out the window. Earl sighed, set the app to ride in progress, and pulled out. The gravel crunched under his tires as he made his way back to paved road, uneasy already. There was something wrong about the air in the car. It felt cold, like the AC had been turned on full blast, though he hadn't touched the dial. His hands trembled slightly on the wheel. He drove aimlessly at first, figuring the guy would speak up once they hit a main road. They passed through Waco, past shuttered shops and darkened gas stations, toward I-35, but the man in the back said nothing. Earl finally asked again, heading to Dallas, Austin? Somewhere else? Keep driving. The voice wasn't angry or forceful, just flat, as though it belonged to someone for whom time no longer mattered. They drove for hours. Earl tried to turn the radio on at one point just to cut through the silence, but the station crackled and hissed like something chewing through static. He switched it off quickly. The highway unspooled before them, miles and miles of blacktop and glowing lines. He passed through towns he didn't recognize, with names that didn't register on his internal map. Linville, Crossgate, Dunley. The signs looked weather-worn, almost hand-painted. He checked the time again around what should have been sunrise. Still 3 a.m., he blinked, pulled into a rest stop near a closed Sonic and rubbed his eyes. The sky was lightening. The birds were stirring. His hands were shaking harder now. The clock on the dash blinked. 3 a.m. You okay? He asked aloud, turning to glance into the back seat. The man was gone. Earl flinched hard enough that his shoulder cracked against the window. He turned fully, heart pounding, empty. Backseat bare. No door had opened. No sound. Just gone. His mouth went dry. He reached for his phone, tapped the Rideshare app to end the trip manually. The screen wouldn't respond. The map blinked in place, spinning slowly, still showing the blue route line curling through central Texas. He put the car in drive and floored it back onto the highway. For the next stretch of road, nothing made sense. Trees he didn't remember passed by again and again. Same sign. Now leaving Millbrook, thank you for visiting. He passed it 3 times. And once, while gripping the wheel tighter than he should have, he caught a reflection in the rear view. Not the same man, but a little girl, pale, eyes black as oil, sitting upright and staring at him like she'd been there the whole time. He didn't look again. He drove faster, faster still, running on pure adrenaline now. No pit stops. No GPS. Just chasing something, anything, that looked familiar. Sunrise finally broke over the horizon, bleeding red and gold across the plains. But Earl's clock still read. 3 a.m., he pulled over on the shoulder of a county road that looked half-finished, got out, slammed the door, and paced around the car. His hands trembled so badly now he could barely unlock his phone. When he finally got the screen to cooperate, the battery icon blinked red 1%, though he'd charged it fully before leaving. He tapped the Rideshare app. It opened, still showed the ride in progress. Still showed the same pickup location, Lakeshore Drive. Destination, TBD. He turned around slowly. The road behind him was gone. Only flat earth stretched there now, with a foggy shimmer above it like heat haze from asphalt. But there was no asphalt. No tire marks, no cars. The sky above him flickered, just once, like a blink, and when he turned back to his car, the man was standing beside it again. "Where are we?" Earl asked, voice small. The man tilted his head. "Almost there. I don't understand. What is this?" The man opened the rear door. "I'm ready to finish the ride." Earl didn't move. His body was locked, mind screaming. But he couldn't stop his legs from moving. He climbed into the driver's seat like a puppet. The sun was high now. Birds chirped. Cicadas buzzed. But the world around them felt dead. He drove again, through towns that didn't exist, through woods where no light touched the ground. The road curved in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Once the tires touched water-deep, black water, but somehow the car kept going. Once he passed a funeral procession moving backward. People in black walking away from an empty hearse. No one looked at him, except one. A child who smiled with too many teeth. He drove until his body gave out. The gas gauge never dropped. The sky shifted between night and day without logic. And all the while, the clock never budged out. Eventually, the car slowed. They were back. Lakeshore Drive, same boat launch, same weeds. Same silence. Earl's hands dropped from the wheel. He looked at the screen. 3 a.m., the man opened the door, stepped out, turned and looked at him. "Thanks for the ride." He vanished into the dark. Earl never saw him go. No sound. Just gone. He sat there until the sky went black again. Until his battery died. Until the car lights dimmed and the chill in the air returned. Then his phone buzzed. New fare. Pickup. Lakeshore Drive. Requested. 3 a.m. He stared at the screen. Eyes wide, hands cold, and without thinking, he accepted. The guy was standing just past the last gas station off Highway 16, where the land opens up into big, empty fields that stretch out like sleeping giants under the dusk. That part of Texas doesn't get a lot of cell service and even less foot traffic. It's the kind of place where a lost dog is more likely to survive than a person. But there he was, wearing a faded brown coat that looked too heavy for the heat, holding a single thumb out like a man who'd forgotten the world had moved on from hitchhikers. Kevin had just dropped off a couple in Jordanton and was heading back to San Antonio, deadhead and bored. He didn't usually pick people up. Too many weirdos, too many risks. But something about this guy, it wasn't that he looked dangerous. He looked tired. Not just physically, but like his bones had. Been worn down from years of listening to things no one else could hear. Kevin rolled to a stop, cracked the window, and leaned over. "You good, man? Need a ride?" The guy nodded once. His face was long, narrow, like it had been stretched from the inside. Deep-set eyes, pale even in the pink-gold light. No bag, no water bottle, no signs of a phone. Just his hands dirty, trembling slightly, and that coat. Kevin leaned over and unlocked the door before he could talk himself out of it. The guy climbed in without a word, settled into the passenger seat like he'd done it 1,000 times. Kevin glanced over, unsure what to say. "Where you headed?" The man turned to look at him, expression flat. "Where the voices sleep." Kevin laughed before he could stop himself. "That's some kind of band? Or like, you mean a hospital or something?" The man didn't laugh, didn't blink. He leaned in just slightly, the way someone might if they were about to tell a secret they'd never said out loud. Just follow the static. The air in the car changed. Not colder exactly, but heavier, like breathing through gauze. Kevin shifted uncomfortably and tried to laugh again, but it came out hollow. Okay, weird request, but sure. You want me to just drive? The man nodded. Kevin turned back to the road and started rolling forward, glancing once in the mirror. He felt stupid. Who says yes to that? Who lets a man like that into their car? He turned the radio on low just to break the silence. Static, not fuzz. Not bad reception, just straight static, as if every station had gone dead. He turned the knob, spun through the dial. Nothing. Just that low hiss like breath leaking. Through a slit-throat dot, the man smiled. Kevin turned the radio off. Guess that's the static you were talking about, huh? No response. The man looked out the window. Kevin noticed his neck was unusually long. Not freakish, but off. His ears stuck out, one slightly more than the other. The kind of face you'd forget in an hour but wouldn't want to see again in a dark place. They passed a broken windmill, an old barn that had half collapsed into itself like a crumpled beer can. The sun dipped lower. Kevin checked his phone. No bars, figures. You? Got a name, man? The passenger tilted his head like the question hadn't made sense. They don't speak names, not where I'm going. Kevin felt a chill crawl up his spine like a wet spider. He swallowed. Right, sure. He drove another 10 minutes in. Silence. The road dipped, then turned into cracked gravel. He wasn't sure when he'd made that turn. It just felt natural, like his hands had moved on their own. You've been there before, the man said suddenly. You don't remember. But your shoes did. Kevin gripped the wheel tighter. What? You walked out once. Not all of you made it back. Kevin's heart began to hammer. He glanced at the man. What the hell are you talking about? But the man didn't answer. His eyes had gone back to the window, watching fields that were too still, too flat. Not even the wind moved out here. Just silence, until the hum began. It came from the air vents. A low, pulsing buzz, like a swarm of bees trapped behind the dash. Kevin slapped the controls. The AC wasn't even on. He turned the radio back on, still static. But buried in it now, faint, were voices. Whispers, gurgles, pleading. He turned it off, heart thudding in his ears. Stop the car, the man said. Kevin looked around. There was nothing. No houses, no lights. Just a field of dead sunflowers, their heads twisted toward the ground like they were ashamed of something. You sure? The man nodded. Kevin stopped. Dust settled around the car like fog. The man got out, left the door open. Kevin leaned over, shouting after him. Hey, you want me to wait? The man didn't turn. He walked straight into the field. Kevin cursed and got out, calling again. Hey, buddy, where you going? But the man didn't answer. And then the static came back, loud this time, from every direction. Not from the car, from the ground, from the air. From Kevin's own ears, he fell to one knee, dizzy. The world spun. The field seemed deeper than before. The flowers moved not with wind, but like they were reacting. Like they felt something walking among them. Kevin crawled back to the car, slammed the door, locked it. The passenger seat was wet, a dark stain spreading like sweat. But it smelled wrong, like burnt feathers and copper. He started the engine. The car sputtered, then died. Outside, in the mirror, he saw figures in the field. Dozens, maybe more. Faces turned toward him. Some were misshapen. Some had no eyes. One was missing half a jaw, but they all had that same look. Like they'd been. Wait, Inga not came at the window. Kevin turned slowly. The man was back. His coat was gone. His skin looked gray, almost translucent. He wasn't breathing. He spoke, but not with lips. The words came from the car speakers, even though the stereo was off. They said thank you. They remember you now. Kevin screamed, tried the ignition again. The car didn't respond. Why me? He whispered. What do they want? The man smiled. His teeth were too long, too straight. They want what you left behind. Kevin looked down. His hands were bleeding. Deep cuts, fresh. A strange black fluid oozed from beneath his fingernails. He didn't remember cutting himself. Didn't remember ever being here before, but his shoes were wet. The same way they'd been after that camping trip in high school. The one near Kotula. The one where Trey had disappeared. The one where they'd all sworn to never talk about what they saw that night in the woods. Kevin felt the darkness pressing. The field was gone now, or maybe it was closer. It was hard to tell. The man opened the passenger door and got in again. Drive, Kevin didn't think. He just obeyed. The road behind them had vanished. The sky above had turned black dot, and somewhere in the static, the voices began to hum a lullaby he hadn't heard since childhood. One his mother used to sing when he was afraid of the dark. Only she'd been gone since he was 8. Still, the tune was perfect. And the voices? They sang it in her voice. Every word, every trembling note. He drove until the dashboard melted. Until his skin peeled and reformed. Until he forgot who he was. But the man beside him never blinked. And the voices never stopped.